2018 was the beginning. From podcasts to live events, Fight Night Picks was off and running.
Do you typically train for a fight with a specific game plan in mind, or do you train for a certain opponent?
Honest to God, I always have the same game plan.
A year later, a new ad.
The cringe fest continues with Henry Cejudo. He pulled out a snake today. Old clip.
Since then, it's been a wild ride. 2022 shaping up to be another crazy year.
Hurt Chandler. He might be peacocking right now. I think that left hook hurt.
Oh! Big time right hands, Michael Chandler!
Oh, they've both been hurt this
Oh!
So as they say, let's get into it.
And welcome back with Fight Night Picks. Absolutely can't wait for our card coming up this weekend. UFC 270 from Anaheim, California. It's Bad Blood, former teammates in the main event between Francis Ngannou and Ciryl Gane, looking to unify the heavyweight strap. And in the co-main event, oh boy, it is a three-peat to the trilogy of Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo. As always, one half of your host duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, as always, Matt Allen FNP. Now, Matt is looking to get the year off on the right foot. He's making 2022 his own, and so far, it's gone pretty well. I'll give the trophy away here early. Wow. Matt was able to get it last weekend. UFC Fight Night, Cater versus Chikadze. All sorts of fun, all sorts of wildness. The fights definitely delivered. But coming up this weekend, we have a much more involved and intensive card. I mean, there's 8 UFC debuts. There's 3 champions on the card, if you count that interim belt as one of those champions, but not a ton of ranked fighters. And there's going to be a lot of learning that needs to be done on this card right here.
There will be. Let's just call this card what it is. It's fairly top heavy. And normally the UFC does this when they have someone like Conor McGregor at the top of the card. You know, one of their like AA++ stars at the top. But we are getting 2 great title fights, fortunately. I am super excited for the main and co-main event. Like you said, we have a main event that's featuring probably the most heavy-handed heavyweight we've ever seen against one of the most technical heavyweights we've ever seen. So can you not be excited for that? And in the co-main event, we've seen Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo in a cage for almost an hour now together, and they're still leaving us wanting more. I'm super excited for this co-main event, and it feels like not enough people are talking about this being a trilogy fight. Their first fight was arguably fight of the year. Their second fight saw the challenger make a bunch of improvements, so hopefully if we can get some sort of a competitive third fight, this is going to be one of the better trilogies we've seen in, like, really ever in the UFC.
If this is your first time tuning in with Fight Night Picks, as I said, 8 UFC debuts, we're the channel to check out because we're going to talk extensively about these prospects that you might not otherwise know of, and a lot of second times out, a lot of prospects overall, and so many different great fights on this fight card. We're going to throw it on over to our Fight of the Night screen, as always, presented by Manscaped. Check them out, manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping. Let's throw it on over to the Fight of the Night screen.
Let us know down below in the comments section who you've got. It's time for the Fight of the Night with Fight Night Picks.
And when we're talking possible Fight of the Night, again, with the first iteration, a possible Fight of the Year, and the second fight, you had a crazy knockdown in the first round by way of Brandon Moreno. In the second round, Figueiredo rallies, and then in the third round, it is all Moreno, and it is all over. So I can't wait for this fight because, you know, flyweight usually always delivers. I mean, think about the last big pay-per-view card that we had. The big marquee fight at flyweight, Kai Kara-France, Cody Garbrandt. I mean, you're pretty much out of your seat the whole time, and Moreno Figueiredo, it's just another one for these guys, as DJ Khaled would say. But he probably wouldn't tap out like he did with the Hot Wings on Hot Ones, and he would probably tune in and watch this fight. I can't wait for this one.
This could be a great fight. There was a point in time where Deiveson Figueiredo was seen as one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the whole entire sport, and when him and Moreno had their amazing first fight to cap off this trilogy, it had a lot of people questioning, okay, is Brandon Moreno on this level now? Like, has he finally made the jump? And what we saw in their second fight was that, yeah, Moreno is that guy. He had finally made the jump from just being a really exciting, good fighter to actually being a championship-level fighter, and this is where the question marks come in. Is Figueiredo going to go back to the drawing board, fix the issues he had in their second fight, and will he be able to make it more competitive the third time around? No matter what the result is of this third fight, I think we can both agree it's going to be an amazing one.
We have a lot to say about the big camp change for Deiveson Figueiredo coming into the trilogy bout. You're going to want to check that out in the individual video. And for our second choice, I mean, This is where it was kind of tricky to try and pick one, because in the main event, Bad Blood, former teammates, should be a great fight, and there's so many different prospects on this card. We went with a couple of steady eddies in this one at 135 pounds. Said Nurmagomedov taking on Cody Stamann, and it's a bit of a clash of styles, but Stamann's willing to box in certain fights, and for Nurmagomedov, he's no slouch on the ground either. That's why I think this fight makes to be such an interesting clash.
Here's the thing. Cody Stamann is very rarely involved in exciting fights, but I feel like we had to put this on the Fight of the Night screen because this might be one of the rare cases where it actually results in an amazing fight, because with Stamann, he's such a great and controlling wrestler when his offensive game is really on point, and Nurmagomedov is such a fun scrambler that I think this is going to be a phenomenal scramble fest of a fight.
Should be an absolutely amazing set of fights. Let us know down below in that comment section who you have as that bonus winner for Fight of the Night. You can't go wrong at this point early on in the week. UFC 270 should be a great card, and you can check out our presenting sponsor, Manscaped, at manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping. And really, instead of UFC 270 Ngannou versus Gane or Moreno versus Figueiredo 3, they could have also called this card UFC Fight Night Entram Gym, because, listen, there's 4 different fighters representing that gym under the banner of Moreno, flying the flag, winning the belt. It should be an absolutely amazing card. We continue to talk about it, all the debuts on this one, but it should be an amazing fight week. And if any fights drop out, if any are added, we'll definitely be here to fill you in on those. As of now, there's about 9 that have been rescheduled, fizzled, moved around. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks for all of that information. And also on big time pay-per-view fight weeks, we also have question mark kicks. It's 2 hours before the prelims. Matt, fill people in if they haven't checked it out yet.
So basically what question mark kicks is, it gives us a chance to kind of go back on our previous predictions. If there was any big weight miss, anything we didn't like in fight week, just kind of gives us a last second chance to talk about the fights, just kind of get hyped up before they start. And it's a pay-per-view too, Craig, so you know what that means. It means after question mark kicks, what, 15 minutes before the pay-per-view starts, we'll be going live, doing a fight companion, having a whole lot of fun.
It should be an awesome time. UFC 270, Gane versus Ngannou. You're not going to want to miss any of it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. As we always say, let's get into it. Big time fight coming up this weekend at flyweight. We have Canada's Jasmine Jasudavicius making her UFC debut, taking on the American wrestling stud Hansen. Now, there's so many different ways that we can break down this fight, talk about the debuting fighter representing Niagara Top Team, and you guessed it, Niagara, Canada, not the Buffalo side. We're talking just strictly in Canada. But for Jasudavicius, she was somebody that came into MMA, and I really had to do a little bit of a deep dive, because making her UFC debut at 32, she's what, 5 weeks shy of her 33rd birthday. That's just not something that you see very often, but it's actually going to be a theme on this card, because you hear Dana White signing people on Contender Series, talking about different fighters on Looking for a Fight, saying, hey, the kid's too old, but I'm going to take them anyway. And for Jasmine, she was somebody that had a bit of a different route coming into not just the UFC, but MMA in general. I mean, a 4-0 amateur career, and she's somebody that's really been on the radar of not just Canadians, but MMA fans for a very long time. I want to credit her management company being Dodge Sports, because friend of the show, Michael Fidel, MMA Prospects, there's a little bit of a partnership there with Dodge Sports, and I've just heard a lot about Jasmine for the longest time, since she was an amateur into the time that she turned pro. But if you read the story about how she got into it, it was off a Tinder date, and I found that very interesting. I read an article from 2020 in August from Aaron Bronstetter. She and her friend, the friend was nervous on the date, there were other friends involved. Then she meets a boyfriend. Then the boyfriend goes to travel in Prince Edward Island to train with, you guessed it, what UFC fighter is from Prince Edward Island? Jason Sago. And in that training camp, Jasmine decides, you know what? I want to hit the mats. I don't want to hang out at Brackley all day. So she hits the mats. She has a little bit of a knack for it. Jason has a fight in Ontario. And then Bob's your uncle, I guess. We're off to the races. And if you look at it for Jasmine, she was a Canadian freestyle wrestling champion. So she does have that in her back pocket. You might hear that she doesn't have combat sports experience. But if you do watch her fights, yes, striking might not be her #1 go-to, but if you do watch her fight, it is an absolute barrage of just pressure from the jump. If she's able to get her hands on you, the very best. That's just kind of like icing on top of the cake, really.
She does have a very, very aggressive game, and that's what makes this fight so interesting, because with Kay Hansen, she definitely is the more experienced out of these two fighters, even though she is a decade younger than her opponent, but Hansen's had a very weird career in her own right. People forget, she was a super hyped up prospect over in Invicta when she was like 18, 19 years old. Like, she was way, way younger, and she was one of these people who, okay, she was very green at the time, but Invicta felt like if they could build her up to a certain point, they might have a star on their hands. And the great thing about Invicta, and we say this about Bellator too, some of these organizations can kind of get away with having less than well-known prospects, or maybe prospects who have a negative record, because you don't always have like national televised TV shows. So you can build these people up, even if they don't always have the greatest starts, and you can actually build them into a really good fighter. But with Hansen, it just wasn't really working for her. And like you had said, she does have a really good American wrestling game, but her whole MMA game is based off whether or not she can get the offensive takedown or not. She does have an okay grasp of striking, but my real big issue with Kay Hansen on the feet is that she doesn't really overcommit to anything. And I know a lot of the times we say that about, oh, that's a positive, but with her wrestling game, it would almost be nicer if she did crash her way into the pocket a little bit more, because we saw in the McKenna fight, she waited on McKenna a lot, and that was one of those weird prospect versus prospect fights where it almost feels like both fighters are 2 years away from being 2 years away because they're both so young, but Hansen was just sort of thoroughly out MMA'd in that fight, and that's what concerns me about her moving forward. And it's nothing against Corey McKenna, it's just she's also another fighter who's very, very young in her MMA career and in her UFC career. So if I see you get out grappled by her, and if I see you just not being comfortable enough on the feet with someone like McKenna, I do worry about you, especially at this division, because with Hansen, if she is going to continue to be this fighter who needs the offensive takedown to really open up the rest of her game, there's going to be a certain limit there. Like, we see a lot of good fighters in this strawweight division get to a certain level where, hey, I have really good wrestling. Look at Randa Marcos, for instance. She has great wrestling, but she was never really comfortable on the feet. Hansen really needs to bring everything together if she wants to jump to that next level.
Which is a really good point that we need to go back to, because you mentioned it, and then you kind of just continued on. Kay Hansen and wrestling at strawweight, giant advantage. Kay Hansen at flyweight, yeah, she has flyweight experience. I went back through it. She has 8 fights on her record at strawweight. She has 3 at flyweight, in which one of those flyweight fights, she weighed in at 116 pounds. And again, one of those fights is a decision loss to Erin Blanchfield. There's no shame in that. And Erin Blanchfield's probably one of the best wrestlers in flyweight, period, like in the entire world. So again, you kind of take the good with the bad, but I go back through it. Kay Hansen definitely has taken on a tougher level of competition, and if you look at it for Jasudavicius, it's really kind of an odd one, because you look at the wins, you look at the losses, maybe not the highest level of competition, and then you go into it. Her only loss as a pro to Elise Reed, who was making her second time out as a pro, but had an extensive amateur record, and that was it for Elise. Jasudavicius was able to get the takedowns early. She pressured a lot. She did eat a ton of shots on her way in. That was really to her detriment. That's how Reed was able to win that fight. And as some of the Jasudavicius fights have gone on, especially the Reed fight, the fight against Julia Pilastri, her last time out on Dana White's Contender Series, she's not on the winning end of the third round in either of those fights, and I think that's really important. Now, the one thing I do have to say, with Hansen having more experience at strawweight than at flyweight, we're moving up to flyweight for the first time in the UFC. Jasudavicius is a flyweight, and a big flyweight at that, a long-rangey flyweight. She did take that fight against Elise Reed at strawweight, since then has been at flyweight. So an interesting one there too.
So in my mind's eye right now, I really only see this fight going 2 different ways. Either Kay can get the takedown over and over and over again, and we see a fairly one-sided fight from her. But if Jasmine can at least go 50-50 with her takedown defense, it's going to be interesting on the feet, because here's the thing. If this fight does become one of those scramble fests, both going for a lot of takedown type of fights, then I think it could be a very entertaining one. If we get 15 minutes of these two striking, it is not going to be the most aesthetically pleasing fight at all. And that's going to be the big thing. Like, if both these fighters are very even with their wrestling and neither is able to secure the takedown, I have a really hard time saying who would be able to really differentiate themselves in a 15-minute striking contest. Because Hansen, I think, is a little bit more upright with her stance, a little bit more to the point. Her hands stay very, very high when she strikes. But like you had said early on, Jasmine is very relentless with her pressure on the feet. And I don't really know what Hansen can do to keep that pressure off of her if she isn't able to secure the takedown. But I keep on going back to, if Hansen is able to get that takedown, she does have really good top pressure. She does have good ground and pound, and she does have an advancing game. She's not somebody who's just going to sit in the guard and just sort of wait for the ref to either stand them up or they'll just stall for a little while. She will try to progress positions, and I do think that's going to be her big key to this fight.
And the weird thing for Kay Hansen, you look at her UFC debut, we just assumed against Jinh Fry, it's going to be early takedown on top. That was a position that Fry had struggled in previous fights, and in that one, she had to try again, and it wasn't until the third round that she was able to get it done. Her last time out against Poppins, she's on the losing end, and for Jasudavicius, she kind of just walks people down nice and square. Nice and square is not always good. The other thing, Kay Hansen, they might talk about her boxing experience from 2018 to 2019. She has a pro boxing career on BoxRec. 1-4, all 5 fights by decision. So whether you like it, whether you don't, that will be interesting. But I think really in this one, it's going to take strength and who has the will to win. And I hate to say that. That is the most cliche thing I've ever said on this channel. But that really is it. Because for Jasudavicius, you look at her last fight, she has a great showing against Plastri early. There's 29-27s out there for scores. And she looked great. Slowed down a little bit in the third, but it was a great fight. So when I look at the odds for this one, Kay Hansen opened a -115. She's a -248 favorite. For Jasudavicius, opened a -105. She's a +200. I'm going to assume the Tapology votes are a little bit closer. Now, they're a surprise to us. They are to you, Matt. I'm going to set the over-under at 67.5% Kay Hansen.
I think they're going to be over.
You're going to say over. Ooh, they're close. 774 total votes, 73% Hansen, 78% by decision. For the 37% that have Jasudavicius, 85% by decision, and it's got to be noted, I mean, a lot of decisions on these two women's records. It really is a tough fight to call, and then when you look at the odds where they're at right now, that makes it even more of a head-scratcher.
100%, but... Yeah, okay, maybe this is me just showing a short memory, but I kind of go back to another fight that we saw that reminds me of this one a little bit from last weekend. Brian Kelleher, a smaller guy, who is the more skilled guy, was fighting someone who was bigger than he is in Kevin Kroom, but the skills ended up beating just the size that Kroom had, so I think I'm going to have to pick Kay Hansen in this fight, because here's the thing, if she can get the takedown, she's going to win this fight. It's going to be one of those cases where we'll kind of be able to tell the whole story of the fight from the first wrestling exchange that these two have. If Hansen's able to secure that takedown, get top position, I fully expect her to be able to maintain that position for the whole entire round, and then she'll probably be able to do it for 3 other ones. I don't expect a finish in this fight at all. But for Jasmine, if she is able to keep it up on the feet and really use her own physicality and size to her advantage, I can see a world where she is able to get the win.
If you see Jasudavicius having a ton of success in the first round, again, against Plastri, it was a 10-8. Like, she did a great job in that one. You talk about takedowns, so on and so forth. We'll have to see how that takedown defense holds up for Kay Hansen. But for me, I do have Hansen in this fight. I think when pressure meets pressure, I'm going to take the fighter that I've just seen out there against the higher level of competition. So for me, I'm going with the smaller fighter, making the jump up. Looks great over on Instagram as far as strength and conditioning is concerned. And Kay Hansen looking like she's doing a little bit of consulting in that area as well. So kudos to her. But both of us going with not our fellow Canadian in this one. We're going with Kay Hansen. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Do you have the natural flyweight of Jasmine Jasudavicius? Do you have the American strawweight upperweight class in Kay Hansen? Should be an interesting fight, and we have a lot more of debuting fighters, so you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it. Big time fight coming up this weekend at lightweight. We have the debut of Los Cabos' own Reyadito Genaro Valdez, and I can't wait for it. This is a guy that spent time with UWC. He's had a fight with Combate, but a lot of time with Lux down in Mexico, and an all-action fighter if I've ever seen one. I absolutely love the style of Valdez, and he's got an interesting stylistic matchup coming in here, taking on Matt the Steamroller Frevola, looking to turn the tides, looking to avoid what I would assume to get cut. I mean, he's a guy right now on a 2-fight losing skid, his first 2-fight skid of his career. And it's not to say it's against bad competition. And he's had some bad breaks going into those fights because in both of them, they were both short notice opponents. And he's had so many fights fall out in the last couple of years. He's supposed to take on Otman Azaitzar. And then we have Potato Gate. So he ends up with Arman Zarukian. And it's a close fight, but he does lose a decision in that one. And then his last time out, I mean, he gets Terrence McKinney on incredibly short notice, knocked out in 7 seconds. So, Frevola looking to right the ship, coming out of Longo and Weidman MMA over there in Long Island. But really, when it comes down to this one, and I have so many different things to say about both of these fighters, they really have contrasting styles, and that might not jive if you do watch Valdez, because he will grapple. But man, this guy throws absolute hammers when it's standing.
And he goes for the knockout with every single punch he throws, which is a fan you kind of respect, you know? He's not going in there trying to win by decision. It's that Mark Hunt mindset. I'd rather I'd rather win by knockout than win by decision, just because, hey, it's way more fun for everyone that way. But with Valdez, we kind of talked about this in the Kay Hansen prediction, how it'd be nicer if Hansen was a little bit more dedicated to her strikes, because she'd almost find herself crashing into her own takedown attempts. That's what Valdez does. He is such an aggressive striker that he almost becomes a wrestler due to his own pressure, because it gets to a certain point where it's like, okay, you're at the cage. He kind of crowds his own punches. I know that's a bit of a boxing term, but he's not great at giving himself a lot of range so he can react to what his opponent's giving him, either defensively or offensively, and then giving his own looks. He will just, like I said, crash his own space, get too close sometimes. But the great thing about Valdez is I'm never worried about him standing in a mirror, just giving away minutes or having a stagnant portion in his fight. When he does fight Frevola, he's going to have that Terrence McKinney mindset of, hey, I'm meeting you in the center of the octagon, and you better be ready when we do. But this is the thing about Matt Frevola. He's kind of like a role player in the NBA that you just know what you're going to get out of. Like, he might not be good every game, he might not be bad every game, but at least I know what his skills are. He's kind of like Carmelo Anthony at this stage of his career. He's going to give me the high shoulder post jump shot. He's going to give me spot up threes in the corner, but that's about it. And with Frevola, like, we can pretty much tell you everything he does tit for tat. Like, he's a good offensive wrestler. He struggles when he faces guys who are sort of that extreme level of wrestling or scrambling. And he doesn't have great striking defense. He holds his hands very upright, but there's not a lot of reaction to his defense. It's very much like, hey, my hands are here, and if you hit my hands, that's great. If you hit my head, I guess I'm going to have to deal with that. But his overall wrestling game is very, very difficult to deal with. And we did see that in the Arman Tsarukyan fight. It's weird that Arman's been involved in 2 of these fights where he was the original, oh, I had a loss to a top-ranked guy, but I still look pretty good, all things considered. He sort of did that same thing for Frevola that Islam Makhachev did for him. Like, yes, Frevola lost that fight. He probably didn't win a single round in it. But he didn't get completely steamrolled by a guy who is believed to be in that sort of 15 to 18 range right now, in the toughest division in the UFC. So I think Frevola, yes, he is on that 2-fight losing streak, and he went from not winning a round in one fight to getting knocked out in the first minute of another fight. But you can't just look at his overall career and his last 2 fights and judge his whole career based on them.
And when you look at the opponent here making the debut in Valdez, it's just interesting when you go down through his overall body of work, because level of competition kind of is what it is. Again, I had mentioned it. He spent a little bit of time with Combate, the one fight, spent some time with Lux, and you look at the guys that he's fought, yeah, I mean, not the best, but not the worst. I mean, his 5-on-1, he beats Hilario Portales, he beats Alain Bautista, he beats Miguel Arizmendi, whose name's going to come up in another one of these videos, a former common opponent. He fights Edgar Diaz Guzman, and his last time out, he fights Patrick White over on Contender Series. Go back and watch that Patrick White fight. Because they go balls to the wall the whole first round, and Valdez has 0 striking defense, and after he expends his gas tank in the first 4 minutes, in the last minute, I don't know how White wasn't able to finish that fight. And the scariest part about that is, if you really, really like Valdez, he was almost a 5-1 favorite in that fight, and he nearly got finished at the end of the first round, nearly got finished at the start of the second round, and then all of a sudden just lands a nice left hand and knocks White down and finishes him.
But I think that kind of speaks to what this fight is going to look like. Either Valdez's strength and overall pressure is really going to overwhelm Frevola early, and he'll probably just have his way with him from that point on, or Frevola can withstand that initial storm and turn this into one of those grit, grimy wrestling style fights. Because here's the thing about Frevola. Yes, we can pretty much tell you everything he's going to do. He's a basic striker, he's a good wrestler, but he does have that weird X factor of, I have great cardio, even though I am at the bottom part of this division. And if Valdez does find himself really going hard for takedowns, really expending a lot of energy on his striking, because that's the thing for Valdez. Let's say he does crash the distance too much on Frevola. Frevola's immediately going to clinch him and turn it into a wrestling exchange, and that's going to be very interesting to see how that affects Valdez's cardio.
There's 2 mistakes that both of these guys make. You hit it right on the head. I mean, for Matt Frevola, he's been knocked out by Polo Reyes. That was his UFC debut, Mexico's Polo Reyes, and then he also got knocked out in his last time out against Terrence McKinney. For Valdez, the big mistake, he throws a really nice leg kick, but they're naked. He brings his hands down, throws a leg kick, and it's cool. It's like if you're sitting there playing UFC 4 and you just walk ahead, don't hold your hands up, and just hit circle if you're on PlayStation. You're going to throw that kick. There's nothing behind it, and you can get taken down off of that specific leg kick. The other thing that he does, if he decides to grapple, normally the striking sets up the grappling, and most people will watch him fight and go, well, why aren't you still punching the guy on the feet? No, he likes to take them down and try and submit them. But when Valdez does this, he rushes to position way too fast against bad grapplers, and they're still able to get out of bad positions. I've seen him in a couple of different spots. This was in multiple different fights where he goes to try and not get his hooks in before he goes with the rear naked choke, and he either slides off the back or he spins himself around into mount. Like, he just ends up in poor positions on the ground. So I do like Valdez. Again, tons of pressure, tons of volume. If you like the way that Joe Anderson Brito strikes, maybe forget about the Bill Algeo fight. But if you like the way that he strikes, again, a guy like Valdez kind of reminds me of him. When I look at the odds, they're weird because Matt Frevola opened a plus 110 underdog, and then he's a giant favorite, and then he's a big underdog again, and now he's a favorite again. He is a minus 217 at this current juncture on Sunday night. For Genaro Valdez, open to minus 130, he's plus 169. We haven't looked at the Tapology vote. Surprised us there to you. Setting the over-under at 55% Frevola. What would you say?
I think Valdez could be the favorite.
I think Valdez is the favorite. 827 total votes, 69% Valdez, 78% by knockout. For the 31% that have Frevola, 75% by decision. So the odds, I'm not heavily in favor of Frevola, but if you're more than a 2-to-1 favorite, you're a pretty decent favorite in MMA. But the fans overwhelmingly with Valdez, is that an overcorrection based on Frevola's last fight in the knockout?
I really think it is. I think people are selling their stock a little bit low on Matt Frevola right now, and I'm not here to tell you he's ever going to get into the top 15 or fight for a world title or be a main event or any of that stuff. But just stylistically, when you look at this fight, you have a power puncher who crowds his own distance way too much. And every time that happens, Frevola's going to just see that as a green light to start wrestling every single time. And yeah, I worry about Frevola for striking even 1 minute out of a 15-minute fight. But if Valdez is going to almost force this to become a wrestling match, I'm going to favor Frevola. So even though the storyline of this fight feels like, Frevola, he's lost 2 in a row. We've got this new exciting guy coming in. Maybe this will be the end of the line for Frevola. I actually think that it's quite favorable of a stylistic matchup for him.
And this is one of the early fights on this card where we have somebody out of Entram Gym. You have Silvana Gomez Juarez, you have Brandon Moreno, you have Michael Morales as well. But for Valdez, looking to kick things off on the right foot, I've got Frevola with that wrestling advantage. Would I be surprised if Valdez knocked him out in the first round? No. So if you want to go that way, 100%. Like, I have no say in the matter there. I have Frevola, but this is the most coin toss fight that's on this card, and when you have somebody that's a 2-to-1 favorite, maybe you really do want to go with our fighter out of Tijuana, Mexico in Valdez. Both of us still going with the steamroll of Matt Frevola to get back on the right track and could be saving his UFC career with a fight right here. You let us know down below in the comment sections who you have in this great fight at lightweight. We've got 2 title fights up at the top. Francis Ngannou taking on Ciryl Gane, and Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo, number 3. You're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Interesting fight coming up this weekend. Little bit of a cut and paste. Last weekend we were supposed to have Vanessa Demopoulos, Silvana Gomez Juarez. It has moved to UFC 270, but we've already talked about this fight in extensive detail. So we're going to throw it on over to that video. We'll update you with the odds and the particulars heading into this matchup at 270. So let's throw it on over to the video from last week. At a combined age of 70, with 23 pro fights between them, the UFC has marketed this fight as strawweight prospects battling it out. We have Vanessa Demopoulos, the little monster, taking on Silvana Gomez Juarez, La Malvada. And Matt, when I was getting ready for their respective UFC debuts, yes, they were both on incredibly short notice. For Gomez Juarez, she was supposed to compete on Dana White's Contender Series. She gets the call. She takes on Lupita Godinez. For Vanessa Demopoulos, she's supposed to be taking a fight with LFA. She gets a short notice call up a weight class against JJ Aldrich. And it wasn't a very favorable matchup for Demopoulos. Same thing can be said for Silvana Gomez Juarez, because if you look at Gomez Juarez's technique and her style, it's very reminiscent of a lot of her training partners and the people that she works with over at Entram Gym. You've got Marcelo Rojo, you've got Brandon Moreno, you have so many good fighters that are pressure fighters, very aggressive with the striking, very good head movement, technical boxing. And for Gomez Juarez, I thought we were going to get that in the debut against Godinez, but she got backed up, she ate the straight shots, she got taken down with ease. And for Demopoulos, she has such a good ground game, and I'll break it down into the nuts and bolts and the pedigree that she has in her grappling, but she had recently switched gyms. She had been working with Fight Ready, Eddie Cha, Santino DeFranco, and again, I can go on and on. Zhang Wei Li's training there of all people with Henry Cejudo and Deiveson Figueiredo. But for Demopoulos, it was kind of like the Keith Richards riff. And she just couldn't get started up. And after the first round, where there was a little bit of striking, it was just JJ Aldrich, who ended up winning that fight by all three judges' accounts, 30-27. So a bit of a disappointing start for both of these women in the UFC, looking to right the ship, looking to earn some wins in their career. And the thing that's a little bit disappointing to some of the fans, too, is if you look at the 5-on-in, 3-2 for Silvana Gomez Juarez, and for Vanessa Demopoulos, 2-3, albeit against a good level of competition. And for Gomez Juarez, you look at it, I mean, she fought Vanessa Mello outside of the UFC, you know, the bantamweight that had a hard time making bantamweight. She lost Ariane Lipski with KSW for the belt, you know. Sometimes the queen of violence, sometimes not. So
often not.
For both of these women, very, very differing skill sets. It is a clash of styles, but I look at this fight and I know you have something to say and I feel the same way.
We've sold enough Wolf tickets on both these fighters to sell out like Wembley Stadium. Like, Anthony Joshua has sold less tickets lifetime than the Wolf tickets we've sold on these two fighters' skill sets, because I agree with everything you said, but you really have to water it down quite a bit. And I don't say that to be rude to either one of these fighters, but it's very similar to what the NBA is going through right now, with a lot of players just not being able to play and finding replacement players to just put in their spot. Like, we were joking around about Lance Stevenson coming back and playing for the Indiana Pacers. Yeah, he looked really good. It's funny to see him do the air guitar again. Oh, it's funny. Like, I remember being a hardcore fan in the early 2010s. It's great to see those players come back. But they're replacement players for a reason. There's a reason they're not out there every single game and every single day. There's a reason Gomez Juarez got her call up to the UFC at 36 years of age in the strawweight division. And same thing with Demopoulos. Like, we talk about her grappling, but when you get beat that soundly by somebody like JJ Aldrich, who isn't a fighter that we ever talk about as being someone who will ever reach the top 15, that's when I start to not really look at you through that prospect scope anymore. You can either one day become a Jeff Hardy, or you're just Paul London for your whole career. That's what it is. They might have very similar skill sets, but one is much more memorable than the other.
What if Brian Kendrick's watching this?
Brian Kendrick's had that little run. I forget who his manager was, but he had a run. I think he was Intercontinental Champion at one point. Either way, I don't think when we're talking about this fight, we're talking about two people who are going to go on and have, like, I don't know, like Jan Blachowicz-esque runs at any point, where they're going to figure it out later on in their careers. I agree with what you said. It very much is a clash of styles, to where if Gomez Juarez is her best version, and I do like what you said, because in her last performance, we didn't see the fighter we saw pre-UFC at all. She was that technical boxer who really did have that Entram Gym sort of background. You looked at her, it was a very stalking forward type of a game where she would go to the body, it would open up her headshots, and she has great boxing combinations. But then you get to the big show and we don't see any of that. So I'm just really concerned to see someone like Juarez fighting a similar matchup to her last opponent. I know Godinez is probably a more refined and honestly a better version of Demopoulos. They do a lot of similar things, although Demopoulos does have that win on her record. I just feel like at this stage of their career, Godinez is a little bit more complete of a fighter. That's why I see Demopoulos winning this matchup based on the style, but I just don't know what they do with Demopoulos after this, because I still don't think getting a win over Gomez Juarez then sets you up for great things in this division.
Well, it's a really tricky one. I mean, for Gomez Juarez, she actually trains with one of Combate's biggest and brightest young stars, and I want to make sure that I get it right. It's Jasmine Haraji, and she's such a great fighter over there. Just won a Combate tournament a year recently in the past year, or this past summer. Somebody really good to lean on, kind of work your complete game. And if you look at it for Demopoulos, I mean, again, Very high level competition all the way up through. The loss to Corey McKenna, who just had a fight booked against Elise Reed that I noticed on Marcel Dorf's Instagram. Wow. She had the loss to Lupita Godinez after that. She beat Cynthia Arcio, which was a really, really impressive fight. And then she ends up against JJ Aldrich. Again,
the Arcio performance, sorry to cut you off, was very similar though to when Cheyenne Bays landed that head kick like 2 fights. It was one of those like, I'm going to throw really hard early on and thank God I landed.
But when you do look at it and you boil it down, again, two very differing styles. For Vanessa Demopoulos, 2-time Pan American grappling champion. She's a BJJ champ, the world over, 7-time national champ, 5-time world champ, brown belt in BJJ. And again, the refinements and the different things that you're going to be able to add to your game by going to Fight Ready, working with somebody like, maybe it's a Tracy Cortez, maybe it's Zhang Wei Li in your own division. It could be anybody over there. There's so many names that are moving to Arizona to train right now. And for Gomez Juarez, I look at it, very, very aggressive, very good technique when things are on. And I mean, you look at it, the fight against Lipsky, it was Queen of Violence. There was a very swollen eye, and it was the Argentinian's eye in that fight. But I go down and I look through it. She did struggle quite a bit against Godinez in the striking. All right, so we're going to update you with the odds, and it's always funny when fights get booked and rebooked, the fact that Gomez Juarez now opened a -130 for this fight. She's a +118 underdog. For Vanessa Demopoulos, open a +100. She's a -142 or thereabouts. It is an average. It's from Best Fight Odds. Now, if we look at the Tapology votes, I wouldn't be surprised if a large contingent go with Demopoulos. Would you?
I think she'll be the favorite.
All right. So, no. 448 total votes. 63% Juarez. 84% by decision. For the 37% that have Demopoulos, 75% by decision. And I mean, for Demopoulos, it's interesting because she got out everything in her last fight against JJ Aldrich. And for Gomez Juarez, she also got out everything in her last fight. She did land a really nice right cross at one point against Godinez, just to get taken down again. So
it's like when Isaiah Thomas signed his 10-day contract with the Lakers and everyone got excited for what the potential of that could have been. It's like, well, he doesn't play defense. He didn't hit any shots. What are we doing here, you know?
Yeah, that's what we got out of Silvana Gomez Juarez in her year 37 season on this planet. So, again, you have Entram Gym all over this card for Gomez Juarez. She's going to have a bit of that, not hometown feel. You are close, I guess, to the gym if you want to go that way between Anaheim and Tijuana. But for Argentina's Silvana Gomez Juarez, another big opportunity here to right the ship with a win over Demopoulos, who's 2-3 in her last 5, albeit against a much higher level competition.
Exactly. And the thing about JJ Aldrich is that no one's ever going to remember her as this like top level fighter, but she is very well rounded and she does have some decent boxing. She's just good at everything. Not good at everything. She's just okay at everything. And if you get beat by someone like that when you're Demopoulos, well, Aldrich is bigger. Like, there's a few excuses that you can kind of have in your back pocket. I just think the grappling of Demopoulos is going to be overwhelming for Gomez Juarez. Now, if this fight's contested 100% on the feet, Silvana will have a phenomenal chance to win, and honestly, she could probably damage Demopoulos to the point where in the second, third round, she might be able to get TKO, doctor stoppage, something like that, but I do just think the pressure of Demopoulos' grappling is really going to get to Juarez.
I'm going with Demopoulos in this one. I think another fight camp, as I had mentioned before, at Fight Ready. You also have footprints from that gym on this card, including in the co-main event, Figueiredo now training out of there. You also have Zhang Wei Li as well with Eric Albarracin and Henry Cejudo, a guy who has pillows of famous MMA figures at his house. Look into it. But on this one, I'm going with the 2017 author of the Stripper Bible. It is Vanessa Demopoulos.
She was on the Netflix show Ultimate Beastmaster, too. Fun fact.
A lot of fun. Didn't know that. Listen, you want to have these fun factoids to share with your friends when you're watching UFC 270? Tell them those Canadian nerds told you all that fun stuff.
Well, no, tell them that we're doing a fight companion for UFC 270. It'll be live during the pay-per-view.
Look at that. Hang out. Salesman Matt, Allen, both of us going with Demopoulos. In this one, let us know who you have down below in the comments section. And keep it locked in with Fight Name Picks. We always say, let's get into it. And a welcome to the UFC to a fresh-faced 22-year-old Michael Morales representing Ecuador. He will become just the second Ecuadorian fighter in the UFC after Chito Marlon Vera, looking to make a big-time impact at welterweight, taking on Trevin Giles. The problem's the nickname, and the problem for Trevin Giles is the fact that this is first ever fight at welterweight. Ever. Now, he looks great on Instagram. Physically, 100% he looks great. Which looks better, Matt? Trevin Giles making 170 on Instagram or Michael Morales' ear after his last fight?
Probably the problem making 170.
Yeah, and it hasn't really looked like a problem, but I have to say that because in the UFC, he has experience at 205. And he took on James Boknovic. That was his UFC debut. Wins that fight, I'd say handily. It definitely was handily. And then if you go over it and through it and whatever you want to do, he's had some interesting fights. But, I mean, you really get into it. The wins that he has lately, Roman Dolidze, who... when he's done trying to please Eric Nixick when he's fighting, that's going to be when he starts winning more fights. And for Dolidze, he was just having too much fun, and then the pressure continued to mount from Giles. It was that power jab and the nice combinations that were able to win that fight for him. He fights Bevon Lewis and then just goes balls to the wall in the third round and knocks him out. And before that, James Krause. But I go into this and I look at all the fights, and I guess Boknovic really the only fight at 205, Zach Cummins, Gerald Mearshart, so on and so forth. It's just been a weird mixed bag for Trevin Giles inside the octagon, and I have to say this too. He has a nice fight of the night against James Krause, but other than Trevin Giles and everybody from Houston, I don't know who thought he won that fight.
Yeah, I thought James Krause had won that fight. And I know... Again, Craig disagrees with the split decision. It's weird, everybody. But I do agree with you. I thought James Krause won that one. He had controlled Giles a lot on the mat. Now, Giles, as that fight progressed, the power punching was too much for James Krause, especially in the third round. But Krause did a really good job controlling Giles, especially in the first 2 rounds of this grappling. This is a way better fight than most of the other UFC debutants making their debut this weekend because... Like, Trevin Giles isn't normally the type of fighter you'd be making your debut against. Giles isn't a borderline top 15 guy, but, like, I don't really see him as, oh, you're one fight away from being taken off the roster. Like, he really is a genuine threat to the middleweight division and now to the welterweight division. And here's the thing about Giles. I think he has a game to where if he can effectively cut weight down to 170, similar to what we've seen Kevin Holland do in the past. Like, Kevin Holland knocked out Jeff Neal outside the UFC at 170 pounds. A lot of people forget about that because Holland then fought at middleweight in the UFC and Neal stayed at 170. But I think Giles has a game to where if he can make 170 pounds safely, he's going to be a real problem at this weight division.
And if you go back through and look at it for Trevin Giles, 183.9, 184.5, now lately 185.5, but if you just look at him physically, he's not really a middleweight. Like, he's a guy that could definitely cut the weight to go to 170. Again, look at the Instagrams. Looks great. Now we focus in on the prospect out of Ecuador in Michael Morales. I mean, what is there that I can't say? Like, I have so many nice things to say about him. Striking? Yeah, he can do it. Is he one of the longest guys in this division? 110% he is. And he used that length very well. And it was something that was accentuated by the commentary team when you watch just his fight on Contender Series. Where's his jab? Because in every other fight, he has a jab. He definitely has a jab. And the thing with Morales that can help him, not just in any UFC fight, but a fight against Trevin Giles. What does Giles do well? Controls distance, uses his jab, and is able to move in and out very well when he needs to. His fight against Bevon Lewis, he does exactly that, and he finishes him in the third round. And then you look at Giles' last fight when he takes on Dricus du Plessis, and he strikes like he's Andrew Sanchez. Like, this is the second thing that I'm doing, but I'm going to make it my first thing. And he dances in and out with his hands low, and he fights with a karate stance. And at one point, the point before he gets knocked out, he throws a nice 4 or 5 punch combo up against the fence and looks like, hey, this could be the beginning of the end for Dricus du Plessis until du Plessis fires a straight shot, drops Giles, and finishes him. So it really is tricky when you just focus on these two guys when it's a stand-up fight.
I think Giles is a big advantage just in the stand-up, if I'm being completely honest. Because this is the thing about Giles. We kind of saw it in last night's main event. If he could crowd Morales and turn this into a boxing fight, Giles shouldn't have many problems. Because, like you said, he's not just good at getting in and out of range. He's good at knowing when to get in and out of range. And I know he got caught getting in or moving in on du Plessis in his last one. But Dricus du Plessis is a former KSW champion. A former, like, legit middleweight, big middleweight with huge power. So losing to a guy like that, it doesn't completely diminish your stock in my eyes, at least. And the thing about Giles, too, is that if he can make 170, and let's say he looks great on Friday weighing in, I think he's going to be able to eat a shot a lot better at this weight class. And this will be the last thing. If he can get on the inside of Morales, I think he'll go to the body, go to the head, and land a ton of combinations. The thing about Morales, though, that I think is going to give Giles trouble is not only the jab, but it's the kicks, too. If he could keep Giles in the center of the cage and just keep on teeing off on him, jab, jab, and then setting up his body kicks, setting up his leg kicks, he might be able to make Giles just a sitting duck for, like, the last 10 minutes of this fight. But again, I really do think distance management for both guys is going to be the key to this matchup.
Trevin Giles, this is the point that I want to hammer home. If you're following along, if you're going to tell your friends anything, Trevin Giles in his UFC fights, total, the most leg kicks he's ever thrown was against Zach Cummins. Guess how many he threw? 3. He threw 3 friggin' leg kicks. That's the most he's ever thrown in a UFC fight. His average for just straight up leg kicks in a fight is 4.125% of his total strikes. That's awful. Now, he wins fights, but that's awful. And it's because he's such a good boxer, and he can mix in the takedown, and he can defend takedowns. He has some of the best hips in this division. And the other thing that he does very well is controls body weight up top. We talked about this last week for Holmes and Pickett. Trevin Giles is another guy like Jamie Pickett that when he's backed up to the fence, he's very positionally aware to where he can turn his opponent around, where he can back out, and then we're back to striking. And for Giles, it's more we're back to boxing. But for Morales, if you watch him fight, very, very good with the leg kick on the inside of the knee to the calf. It just depends on the opponent. The other thing for Morales, he's a 3-time national wrestling champion, and I really like to see that, and a Muay Thai champion as well. Oh, yeah. And he's only 22 and he's 12-0. Now, level of competition, I told you I talk about it because for Valdez, he fought one of the similar opponents, and that's a scary thing. You look at his second to last fight for Morales, he fought Miguel Arizmendi, a guy who fought at lightweight, and then lightweight against our guy Valdez, then at welterweight against Morales, and then his next fight was at featherweight. So that guy, a little bit of a pad to the record. And then his last time out for Morales, he takes on Nikolai Vitatenikov, and in that fight, it was weird because that was a setup fight for Nikolai. He was supposed to win that fight. He was on Dana White's looking for a fight. Dana said, oh, no, we want you on Contender Series because you're too old. But now 30-year-olds get shots in the UFC. But Nikolai didn't. But when he fought Morales, first round was halfway competitive, and then Morales completely swept the rug out from under him, took him down multiple times. And to me, it was the scrambles and the awareness on the ground that really got it done. You talk about a guy that understands the body weight, especially when it's on the mat. Morales did exactly what you love to see out of a young prospect.
He has a great understanding of momentum to where if people are falling in a certain way, he'll just kind of go with the flow of their movement and end up in top position. This is my big point about this fight, though. I don't think Morales can take down Trevin Giles. I really don't. Maybe he can, but in my mind, if he can't do it, he is going to be screwed on the feet because Giles is so good at getting in and out of boxing distance that I don't think that's going to be a big problem for him in this matchup, and I don't think Morales has enough pure power to just make Giles pay for getting in and out of the pocket. So I always go back to, can Morales get Giles down to the mat? I think if he does, he's going to waste an awful lot of energy doing it to the point where I don't know how much he'll be able to progress into an offensive position from there. And if he can, Giles is very positionally aware on the mat. I know James Krause is able to have some success with him, but Krause is a legit grappler who is very, very tricky on the mat. So again, that doesn't completely diminish Giles' stock in my eye. I think this is going to be a phenomenal fight, though. I'm not going to lie. This isn't like the greatest pay-per-view top to bottom of all time in terms of depth, but for a guy making his debut against like a genuine talent in the UFC, this is as good of a fight as they could make.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it for Morales in his last fight, he did a suplex with about 10 seconds left in that one.
It was awesome.
Like a full suplex. You don't see that stuff very often, and I always like to watch these Contender Series guys when they win or when they get the contract, they're sitting down. Dana White's words were, I see signs of possible greatness. Like, sometimes he minces words, or sometimes it's like, yeah.
I said that about Uros Medic, too.
We were going to sign the guy anyway. Well, he had a really good debut against Ceylon Cruz. But still, for Morales, he is such a fun fighter to watch. Now, he opened a minus 155 favorite. He's a minus 145 now. For Giles, in the debut at 170, he opened a plus 135 underdog. He's plus 120. If we look over on Tapology, the votes have it 628 total votes. You have 60% for Morales. You have 40% for Giles. Majority have the fight to go to a decision. So that's it. The big question marks that I have here. I have keys. Morales pre-Dana White's Contender Series. Great jab. Trevin Giles, one of the best jabs in MMA. Then the other thing. Gas tanks. Both guys usually take their time, so it's going to depend on how Giles looks at 170, quite honestly. I mean, this is a guy at 185 that finished Brendan Allen and has a win over Ryan Spann. And that's not even in the UFC. That was outside of the UFC. So Giles had a great run. Now it's kind of been a mixed bag so far. I mean, again, Dricus du Plessis is a very good fighter, former champion from a giant organization of KSW, one-on-one with Roberto Soldic, who would mop the floor with some of these guys. But when I look at just this fight, it really is tough to call down the middle.
It is a tough fight to call, but you set it up perfectly. Just for me, if Giles looks like the same fighter at 170 that he did at 185, I think this is his fight to lose. I really do. I know he's the underdog, but I like his wrestling defense. I like his wrestling offense. And I think on the feet, he's at least steady enough to where he can put together combinations at any point during the fight, whether they are at open distance in the middle of the cage, or if he gets Morales up against the cage. And that really is the big key to it for me. If Giles gets Morales up right against the cage, he's going to unload on him with like 4, 5, 6 punch combinations. and those are really going to matter in this fight. If Morales gets Giles up against the cage, he's going to tee off on him, probably start breaking him down from legs up to the head, but I still think Giles is going to be able to counter off some of those, whereas Morales won't be able to counter off the attacks of Giles as much. So maybe even against my own better judgment, I do think Trevin Giles will be able to get it done.
To me, Morales is one of those guys that definitely understands his length. He's got pop at the end of his shots. Now, for Giles to back up Morales, he can back out, work the body, something that he does to great effect, where he misses out on leg kicks, he makes up for it in body work to tire out his opponents. Look at Roman Dolidze in their last fight.
He's got big muscles, though.
When I look at this one for Morales, I absolutely love that he has youth on his side, and I love his wrestling, even in a fight against a great wrestler. So I'm just interested to see what Giles looks like on Friday. That's going to be the determining factor for me making a pick on this one. But early on in the week, I do have Michael Morales here.
Yeah, I think this could be a great fight, but I do like Trevin Giles.
Split on the pick. Matt going with the hand where Tim Williams tried to put the city on the map. We're talking about Houston. He's going with Trevin Giles. I'm going with Ecuador's Michael Morales to get the win in his UFC debut. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this one. We have a stacked lineup of fights that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Coming up this weekend at Bantamweight, we have Tony Gravely taking on the brick house that is Saimon Oliveira. And for the guy who looks a lot like Thomas Almeida in Oliveira, he is a very interesting prospect. Now, when you look at him, I say prospect, he's 30, so he's older than me, and he has 21 pro fights, so he's not really a prospect. But he is, and they'll tell you that he is, so I will. So when I look at this fight, Oliveira, where he looks like Thomas Almeida, and when he fights, he looks like a Muay Thai fighter. Majority of his fights end by submission, and the way that he grapples is all power and fury and everything that you love to see if you want an exciting fight. He's nothing like Tony Gravely, because for Tony, he boxes to strike, or I guess he strikes to box, he boxes to strike. He strikes to get the takedown, and when you look at it for Gravely, he is one of the most active guys at working his grappling in this entire division's history. Now, do I have the numbers to back it up? I do, but for Gravely, he only has 4 fights in the UFC, so when you compare him to the best out there, it is a little bit chintzy. All I can say is that he averages 5.57 takedowns per fight, and that is just outstanding, especially to fight with that work rate as a guy who was a former champion in other organizations. To do what he does in 3 rounds and have a fight of the night against Brett Johns, even though he lost, he is an interesting guy here, because it's now or never for a 30-year-old like Gravely, who, oh, by the way, has 28 pro fights on his record, too.
Gravely, to me, is like the Michael Olashechuk of the bantamweight division, because I can sell you a package of him to where he is one of the better fighters going. He's a dominant wrestler. He's an uber athlete. He's got knockout power. And you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, this guy sounds like a really, really good fighter. And then I can sell you another package of Gravely where he wrestles himself into exhaustion sometimes. He throws bombs so big that they force his head to be wide open, and then he gets countered. And he is such a strange fighter, because in every Gravely fight, there's moments where he looks like he could be destined for the top 15, and there's other moments where you think a guy fresh off Contender Series could probably blow him out of the water. And that's where this fight becomes so interesting, because like you would say with Oliveira, he looks the part of like top contender coming in. Like, he's massive for the division, he has eye-catching talent, he's a very spectacular striker. And here's the thing, if Oliveira beats Gravely, it's going to be one of those like Slava Claus knockouts from this past weekend, to where he's going to hit him with a big shot, put him down, and probably choke him out on the way up, and everybody's going to lose their mind and be excited about it. But he also could get out-wrestled for 15 minutes, because with Gravely, I don't have a good read on him, and I can openly admit that, because every time I think that his wrestling is finally going to pay off, and we're going to see that finally dominant Gravely performance, it never really seems to happen, and it seems like when I am confident in picking him, he finds a way to lose. So I'll hand it back off to you. I think this is a very exciting fight, but it should be a very good one.
If Tony Gravely gets just 2 takedowns in this fight, so then he moves into the category of, okay, we can talk about the all-time fighters, because you need a minimum of 5 UFC fights to make any impact in those numbers and those metrics. He has 17 takedowns. If he gets 2 more, he's tied for 10th all-time in the bantamweight division at 19. Kung O Gong is one of those guys there. Merab Dvalishvili, number 1, he has 50. 50 takedowns.
Chamberlain numbers.
It's insane. Nobody's ever going to break that metric, and it's just going to keep going on until the end of time. But when I do look at it for Gravely, that's exactly it. He was an ATT Atlanta guy who else do you have there? Rafael Sansau's been there. The Limas have been adjacent to that gym for a very long time. Moved down to American Top Team proper in, Deerfield Beach. And if you look at it, training with Marcos D'Amata, a really good guy to get ready for a fight like this. Now, if you look at it for Oliveira, you go down through, he trains at Astra Fight Team. Is it shoot the box? No, it isn't. But Astra Fight Team's had a lot of good fighters, and Simon Oliveira went to the effect of getting Astra Fight Team tattooed on his left forearm. So now he can't leave the gym. He's forever indebted to them. It's like getting a brand on Yellowstone. Well, now you're just a part of Yellowstone now. Matt doesn't watch the show.
Never.
Silly.
Never will.
Silly stuff. But when I look at it, I mean, Gleico Franca trains there. But, you know, Stenozolol and everything with PFL. And, I mean, another good fighter, Alex De Silva, but he lost his last fight and he hasn't been around for a long time. Okay, I'll give you a good fighter. Tyler Santos trains out of Astra Fight Team. So somebody that you can really hang that ball cap on and say, hey, she should challenge for the title maybe someday, unless Chukagian gets the next opportunity. But when it relates to this fight, I like to look into some weird numbers too. So I go into Fight Matrix and I go, hey, what does Fight Matrix have in their little algorithm? Where do they have these guys ranked? They have Simon Oliveira as the 140th ranked bantamweight in the world, and they have Tony Gravely as number 91, so that's a pretty big jump. That's a really big jump. And then I look at everything. 10 first-round finishers for Oliveira. He's got 4 in the second round, 1 in the 5th round of a fight, you know, years ago, and then only a few decisions. He doesn't normally go to decision. He normally gets it done early against a guy that has the staying ability. Well, in his last fight, that kind of contradicts it against Manus.
Well, with Gravely, the whole thing is, can he pace himself? Because if he can't, he will wrestle himself into exhaustion. It'll be a very Chad Mendes-like performance, to where the first 4 minutes, you're like, wow, this is all going so well. And the last 4 minutes, it's like, wow, this isn't going well at all. But it does come down to, how well does he pace himself? And really, how good is his opponent's takedown defense? Because if you're forcing Gravely to work really, really hard for all of his takedowns, then yes, you will be able to tire him as the fight goes on. But let's say he just puts his hands around you, and the second he grabs his hands, you go down, then he will be able to pace himself. Because if he can sort of, I don't want to say stall, because he isn't the most active guy in the top position, if we are being honest, but he's not to Jake Shields levels, to where it's like half guard, full guard, half guard, full guard. He just really does need to fight at his own pace, and that is the big key. But I hate how open he leaves himself on the feet, and that is what I kind of go back to with this fight, because if he finds himself crashing into distance on Oliveira, trying to reach for takedowns, or just leaving himself a little bit too wide open, that's where he is going to get caught, sort of a head-on collision like we saw Stipe versus Verdum. Because if you're moving into a shot that's meeting you, it's just going to accentuate Oliveira's power. And Oliveira, like you said, he has great stand-up. He is a very good Muay Thai fighter, although a lot of his wins do come by submission. But he's in that, like, Carl Roberson category.
His striking defense is bad.
It's not good at all.
Again, and I already talked about that Chukagian fight, but you watch Jennifer Maia fight, and honest to goodness, Simon Oliveira, hands up here, we're going to wing hooks, and when somebody tries to back up Oliveira, I mean, his takedown defense is, I'm going to submit you. You look at his last fight before Contender Series, he takes on, over with Pancrase, it's Wataru Mimimura, who just runs across the cage. Oliveira just grabs him and ends up kind of reversing position at a certain point. And he gets, they say front choke on Topology. It was a darce the way that he rolled into it. But it was really good positional awareness. He's feeling it. The crowd's feeling it. Everything's good. But I look at Oliveira as one of those guys that he's either going to have like a top 15 run on him and you're going to go, wow, look at this guy that came into the UFC at 18-3, almost like a Tyler Santos with so many fights and so much experience, and then, boom, they belonged here a long time ago. Or he's going to flame right out because the way that he fights, I mean, his takedown defense is all right, but when he goes for his own takedowns, he rushes all the way across the cage. They are quite telegraphed, and against Jose Alde, like, that's a split decision win. It's a good win, but, I mean, to get into the UFC off a split decision, like, that's an interesting one, too, in itself.
Well, all I was going to say is, I would be surprised if this fight ended knockout either way. Because, like you said, both guys are quite good offensively with their strikes. Like, Gravely puts everything behind his overhand, right? To where, if you do put your hands down trying to defend his takedown, and he goes up top with a shot, it's going to hit you, and you are going to hit the ground. But with Oliveira, he pulls back with his chin up very high. Now, he can counter off of his back foot, but his response to everything is just more offense. It's the same thing. Great point. It was he doesn't defend takedowns as much as he's looking for an offensive opening for his own submissions. It's the same way with his striking. If you're backing him up with the striking, he's less worried about blocking your shots coming towards him as he is focused on trying to hurt you more. And that's why, like, if he catches Gravely with a knee up the middle on the way in, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. And if Gravely ducks and throws an overhand and catches Oliveira, George Root Cub Swanson style, I would see that very, very likely outcome as well.
Luta Livre, the background for Simon Oliveira. You know, that martial art that nobody ever talks about that used to be head-to-head with BJJ. Claudio Poyes has a background in Luta Livre. Marco Huas has a background in Luta Livre. We look at this fight, and in terms of the odds, Gravely open to -170 favorite. He's a -250 right now. Little too rich for my blood, as we hear Puppy Chuck in the background. And Oliveira open to +145. He is at a +200 right now. So we have a look at the Tapology votes. Surprised us there to you. When the odds slide that far in favor of one fighter, I'll say over under 70% Gravely. What would you say?
I'll say slightly under.
I'd say, you know, yeah. Look at that. 801 total votes, 61% Gravely, 69% by decision. For the 39% that have Oliveira, 53% have him to win by submission. So, listen, the support is there for the UFC newcomer. The man who spent more time in the octagon, the 4 UFC fights, the 1 fight on Contender Series where he finished Ray Rodriguez, that is Tony Gravely a few years ago. And he's got championship experience on his hands. And he's got experience against, you know, fighters that would end up in the UFC. Like a guy like Draco Rodriguez where he just out-wrestled him the whole fight. He has that kind of experience. This is a tough matchup for both guys, and it's a tough one to call. It really is.
It 100% is. But this is what I will say. Who's more likely to win a decision? Probably Tony Gravely, and that's what I fall back on. Because I could see a world where either guy gets a finish. If Oliveira wins via defensive submission, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. And again, if Gravely caught him with a really big shot on the feet, got into full mount, hammered him out, I wouldn't be surprised with that outcome either. But I do think Gravely can just be the more steady guy throughout 15 minutes. And it all comes down to his wrestling. Here's the thing. Even if you defend 12 of my 15 takedown attempts, you being on the defensive isn't going to help you in the judge's eyes whatsoever. And I think that's what Gravely can do if things aren't going well for him in the stand-up. If he can make it a clinch fight, if he can make it more of a wrestling battle than just a mixed martial arts fight, I think that'll be an easy way for him to win.
For Tony, Gravely took on a great pure grappler in Anthony Burchak on short notice, and he ended up finishing him in that fight. Got a performance bonus for that one. Like I said, fight of the night bonus against Brett Johns, who I thought maybe one day he'd be in his top 10. I thought he'd be around forever, and then he goes to Bellator and he loses, and it was the Fight Night Picks interview curse. I do have Gravely in this fight, but I want to hear from everybody down below in the comment section, because I know that 75% of them have Oliveira. And I want to hear from you, and you got to tell me why. So hit up the comment section. Let us know who you have in this one, because this is closer than the odds would definitely suggest. We're both going with the USA's Tony Gravely in this fight. We want to hear from you, especially on the rest of the fights on this card. Up at the top, 2 title fights, 125 and 265, the 2 extremes. Let's keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Perth, Australia, stand up. Coming up this weekend, we have the respective UFC debuts of Jack Della Maddalena taking on Dead Game Pete Rodriguez, one of the weakest nicknames I've ever heard. However, Pete Rodriguez makes it real because he knocks guys dead, and in his 4 pro fights, he's finished them all in the first round. And this is a guy that just comes out winging from the first second. And if you look at his fights now, all the pro fights are with Icon, and then you go through and you go, okay, well, why is a guy that's 4-0 fighting a guy that's 10-2 who's won his last 10 fights? Well, then you got to actually consider the man Rodriguez's amateur career, because it's extensive. He went 7-2, knocking more guys dead over there. And the craziest part about it, you look at it, the level of competition as a pro is bad. It's bad. He took on 2-2 Jorge Olea at Icon FF. Number 2, then he fights at 3, then he fights at 6 and 7. He's not going to see it through for Jorge Masvidal's takeover of Icon, which is coming up very soon. But if you do look at it for Rodriguez, he beats Olea and knocks him out. He knocks out Yazer Guzman, who's 0-1. He knocks out Jose Luis Rios, and then he finishes Roberto Pixley. Now, Roberto Pixley, the best name on this record, because again, you're beating a guy who's 2-2, 0-1, 1-0, and 5-1. Roberto Pixley, 5-1. All 5 of his wins were against debuting fighters. So the level of competition is bad, but, and there's always a but, All of those guys were knocked out in the first round quickly. And if you look at the fight against Yasser Guzman, Rodriguez doesn't give it any time. He just runs across the cage, throws a flying knee like Jorge Masvidal, and knocks out his opponent. You look at his fight against Pixley, he just kind of takes his time, walks him into a corner, throws a hellacious right uppercut, and then just a straight left shot and drops him. So I absolutely love the power and fury that I have out of Pete Rodriguez, who, by the way, in his first 2 fights, you might go, who is this Pete Rodriguez? I can only find 2 fights. Pedro Rodriguez for the first 2. Look at it for Pedro Rodriguez.
The name's Rocco now.
Threw me for a loop for a little bit, but Pedro Rodriguez, Pete Rodriguez, this guy's a lot of fun.
He really is. And here's the comparison that I've thought of, and I think you'll agree with me. He's a lot like Chaos Williams. And honestly, the breakdown for his fight has sounded a lot like our breakdown for the initial Chaos Williams fight. It's, hey, he has eye-catching power, he is that talent, but he's knocked out a bunch of guys who he probably should be knocking out before he comes to the UFC. And that kind of is my prediction about what Pete Rodriguez's career could look like in the future, because I agree with everything you just said. Like, he has incredible power, and no matter what the stylistic matchup is in his fight, he's going to have a chance based on his power and based on his strike variety. And similar to Chaos Williams, we weren't very high on him coming into the UFC, and look how good he's been.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. So I have all these nice things to say about Pete Rodriguez. I have no idea what his ceiling is. He's coming in on incredibly short notice, replacing Warlley Alves to take on Jack Della. And when you look at it, Warlley Alves on his best day beats Colby Covington, and on his worst day gets knocked out senseless by Jeremiah Wells in a fight that he was halfway competitive in before that happened. So it really is a tough one. When you have so many unknowns on Pete Rodriguez, he comes out to dominate MMA in Arizona. It's a small gym. It's not fight ready. It's not the lab. Like, it really is a really tough one. Do I have any knocks on Rodriguez? Not a single one. Honest to goodness. His combinations look good. His power looks great. He's taking on Jack Della, who is one of the most well-known Australian prospects since Alexander Volkanovski, and they'll tell you about that. And they'll tell you, hey, Jack Della, when he was in school, he was into rugby. But then he had to give up the rugby dream to become an MMA fighter. Craig Allen played club team rugby in university. Maybe it's my turn to turn pro. Hey?
When you hear about these 30-year-old prospects, does it give you a little bit of, like, gas in the tank just to think, hey, maybe one day I could do it?
B-side, I scored in 7s. Hey, let's go. Wow. And listen, people might not believe this. I have witnesses. There were people at those games.
I don't know what any of that means.
And I played, like, I never played rugby as a kid until I was in university, and then... nope. But when I look at this fight for Jack Della, there's a reason why he's such a hype prospect. And now I have to make this crystal clear. Because Casey, I know you're out there. Cam, I know you're out there. Jack Della was the eternal MMA welterweight champion. And if you look at the fights that he had before he went on Dana White's Contender Series this past summer, he fights 2 guys that are very important. Glenn Pettigrew, and then he goes out there and fights the man himself, Alden Bates. And you might go, well, why is that important? Because those were both rematches. He beat Pettigrew the first time, well, he beat him the second time. But he did not beat Bates in their first fight. And if you do look at it, there's a great story about Jack Della. And it's just like our analogy that we use all the time off of an NBA 2K video game where Doris Burke talks about a conversation that Dwayne Casey had in the locker room. You just got to pound the rock. And how that relates to this is the fact that Jack Della gets finished in his first 2 pro fights. Most people either go out there and just lay an egg from here on out. They could have a career like Jay Ellis, and that happens. Or they tell their coach, listen, I'm going to win my next 10 fights. I'm going to go to the UFC. He said that. It happened. So it's crazy to see what Jack Della's been able to do. Now, that's just the intangibles. How about the skills? Well, I'll tell you about the skills. This guy can fight in either side. And the best part about him is when he's fighting from orthodox, his left hook is his best power weapon. When he's fighting from southpaw, his left straight's his best shot. And it's weird to see him because mid-combinations sometimes he'll switch stances and go to his left side and then fire away with that left hand and knock guys dead. So for Jack Della, it's the combination of combinations, but it's also his head movement and the way he's able to move on his feet that I absolutely love, because this is a guy that when he gets backed up, he can eat some shots, but at the same time, he's cognizant enough that he's going to move his feet both forwards and backwards, but also side to side, and I love that. And I've seen so much more fight tape on Jack Della as well.
Well, exactly, because there's so much more available. Now, that's a bit of a double-edged sword for Pete Rodriguez. The good news is you knock everyone out very fast, so no one knows where the rest of the footage is. But The thing about this fight is, I agree with you, Jack Della has all the intangibles that you look for when you think about a guy who's going to have more than just 1, 2, 3 fights in the UFC. He does have those intangibles to where he gets in and out of the pocket well, he seems to be a cerebral striker. None of that matters, though, if he does get hit by a 2-punch combination from Pete Rodriguez, and that's the only hesitation I have about even throwing, like, the L word that we never use on this channel on Jack Della, because here's the thing. Since he is somewhat hittable, and since he does move straight back with a lot of his striking defense, if Pete Rodriguez does have success early in this fight, and if he is able to get his timing early on, I could see him landing a massive knockout blow at some point early on in this fight. But the thing that Jack Della has going for him is that if he can even mix in his grappling a little bit, I think he'll have success. Be that not just with the pure wrestling, even just the clinch, I think that would be a great thing to give Rodriguez, just to switch up the looks. But if he can, like you said, switch stances effectively and make Rodriguez miss. The great thing about you having all of your fights finished in the first round is that you have great power. But it's also the Shane Carwin problem to where, hey, we don't know what you look like in the second and third round. And with the way Rodriguez fights, I don't think Rodriguez is going to look good in the second and third round. I famously said, not famously, we're not that big of a deal, but I said this a lot, where I don't think Paulo Costa has bad cardio. I just thought he was in some fights where he threw a crazy amount of output. And to be honest, Craig, you rolled your eyes a lot and you didn't agree with me whatsoever. And then he fought Marvin Vettori and showed that, like, hey, I have pretty good cardio. Pete Rodriguez, his fights haven't shown me what Costa has shown me. Like, I don't look at Rodriguez and think that he can throw sustainable power punches throughout 15 minutes. I think he does fight in flurries. So for me, this fight comes down to how does Jack deal with the flurries of Rodriguez?
And when you really do look at it, I mean, in certain fights, when I look at Jack Della, my comparable is Justin Gaethje. He's a guy that can really carry his power late in his fights. He can really parry with a lot of his opponents. And again, that's for better or for worse. In a fight like this against Rodriguez, 2-punch combination, it's bye-bye, night-night, and you could really end a UFC career. Like, this guy hits harder than a lot of people. And the scariest thing about Pete Rodriguez is he's one of the smallest welterweights you're going to see. And I wrote this down. His first pro fight was at 175. His second pro fight was at 175. His third fight was at 165. His last fight was at 170. When I look at him, he's not like yoked up. He's kind of like Mac when he's bulking before that next season of Always Sunny. It's just dirty bulk season.
There's a welterweight champion of another organization who has a very similar build to Pete Rodriguez. Oh, is Ray Cooper? Yeah, Ray Cooper III, the PFL welterweight champ, is kind of built the same way as Pete Rodriguez. Now,
inside, there's a poster over there with Ray Cooper.
Here's the thing, though. Ray Cooper III, much better and, like, really good at wrestling and super technical. So not the best of comps, but he does have that compact build that you have to watch out for in Rodriguez. But the thing is, other than the eye-catching power, I still think Jack Della has the much more well-rounded game and the much more technical game.
Yeah, when I really do focus on this for Jack Della, not only the swagger in the cage, but when he goes for that second of the rematches, his fight before Contender Series when he's taking on Alden Bates, he walks out to The Payback by James Brown, and I absolutely love that song. And then in his fight on Contender Series against Ange Lusa, man, that's a lot of fun. Della's a minus 125 favorite. They go at it. The first round is nuts. And then it kind of sides more and more with Della. I mean, it was a 30-27 for me for Della in that fight. But I look at the odds for this one. Again, Della minus 300 favorite. You've got Rodriguez coming in a plus 250. Over on Tapology for those votes. 404 error code. You get 88% Maddalena, 74% have to win by knockout. For the 12% that have Rodriguez, 72% by knockout. And you've got 24% of them are turkeys. They have Rodriguez to win by decision. If Pete Rodriguez wins this fight by decision, I will chug a whole bottle of Poirier's Ghost Pepper Sauce for this channel. I'll do it.
Wow. I'm not going to, because there's always the possibility, and I just want to say that right now. I think Jack Della wins this fight 9 times out of 10, but power is like the thing you always have to watch out for. This is why MMA is such a great sport. You can win via a 20-point Hail Mary. Like, if you have Steph Curry and you're down by 15, that's great. He can help you, but all of his shots still only count for 2 points or 3 points. If Pete Rodriguez is down 2 rounds going into the third, and if he lands a massive uppercut, it erases all of the negatives from the previous 2 rounds. So that's why MMA is such a great sport, but you do, or at least I feel like you have to pick the more skilled skilled guy, and that would be Maddalena.
When I look at this one for Maddalena, one of the things that I really like, A, from the left side, it's the left hook to the body, but B, I've seen him from orthodox go right hook to the body, left hook to the head, right cross. So there's so many different combinations out there that you have to watch for from Della, but I can say all of these things because there's so much more fight tape, and he's knocking out guys, or not knocking out guys, so fast in the first round. So Pete Rodriguez, huge opportunity. He could definitely knock out Della Maddalena in this fight in the first round because he has that type of power, and Della Maddalena can get hit. Although I said his head movement's good, his core movement's good, and he moves very well on the feet, forward, backward, and side to side. Rodriguez is one of those guys that can shut your lights out. That's why I'm so confident in I'll drink a whole bottle of hot sauce if Rodriguez wins a decision, because that would knock my socks out in surprise. I could see Rodriguez winning this one in the first round. I like Della in this fight, but this is one of the most interesting fights on this whole card, and I can't wait to hear from everybody down below in the comment section, whether you feel strongly either way. Arizona's got a great shot here in dead game, right?
They do. They certainly do, but this should be a great fight.
Should be a great fight. Both of us going with Australia's Jack Della Maddalena to get the win. And again, we want to hear from you in the comments section for all of these fights, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So hit us up over there. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it. If this is your first time with Fight Night Picks, we want to thank you for tuning in. As always, one half your host and duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, Matt Allen FNP on the respective socials. We make it very easy because wouldn't it be crazy if you just had a mononym like that, Matt Allen FNP, and you go around, that's the rest of your life?
You're like Nene.
It would be weird, like Nene or Cher or Bono. I don't know. There's a lot of them out there, but when we have a fight like this, there's so many important things that we have to say. And for Belair Quebec Canada's own heir, Ciryl Gane, he has another opportunity to get that marquee win. And he started off his UFC career with one of those. Now, his UFC debut was not, because it was up a weight class. He took on a good wrestler in Desmond Green, and unfortunately, it wasn't his night. Now, that nightmare has kind of played itself over and over. It's been to Jourdain's detriment. It could definitely be to his detriment in this fight against Topuria, but we won't go that way, because what does Jourdain do in his next fight? He knocks off Doo Ho Choi's block, one of the best strikers in the featherweight division, looks amazing, gets a bonus in Doo Ho Choi's hometown of Busan, South Korea. And listen, he's followed up with amazing performances since then. And even in fights that he's lost, like the one against Andre Fili, he put on a very impressive performance. His last time out against Andre Ewell, he had one of the best fight finishing moves, even though it didn't finish the fight. It was at the last second of the third round against Andre Ewell, where he throws the kick to the body. Ewell goes halfway across the cage. He then yells, and it's like, wow. Ciryl Gane, now we're on the map. And what does he do? Well, a few weeks later, he fights a guy that nobody wants to fight in Georgia, or Spain by way of Georgia's own Ilia Topuria. And the UFC's had these awards lately, Matt. They called them the Punchies. I don't know what, kind of input Sylvester Stallone and Paulie had on that one, but the Punchies. Punchy. And the award was Best Dressed of 2021. They had Max Holloway. They have Sean O'Malley, Israel Adesanya. They have Kamaru Usman. Where's Ilia Topuria on that list? Because the guy dresses well, calls people out, and then goes in there and looks amazing. And his last time out, he did things to Ryan Hall that nobody's been able to do in the UFC.
Ilia Topuria is going to be in the top 15 sooner rather than later, and that might give away my prediction for who I think is going to win this fight. But here's the thing. Ciryl Gane isn't just going to fall over and give up in this fight, and I think that's what makes him such a fun short notice opponent, because 9 times out of 10 you have somebody making their short notice debut, or they're coming in on short notice, and they're just kind of an opponent who is brought in, and you're thinking, okay, they're doing it for a paycheck, that's it, they'll get another chance down the road. Ciryl Gane just got done training camp. He is still probably in shape from his last fight, because it was literally the moment his last fight was done, he called out Ilia Topuria, so I don't expect him to really balloon in weight or anything crazy in between these two fights. And he looked great in his last fight. I know Andre Ewell's no longer really in the peak of his career, and he wasn't like a top 15 guy even at his peak, but still, he's a tough fighter to beat on his best day. And for Jourdain to go out there and just beat the brakes off him in a stand-up fight really shows a lot and tells you just how good Ciryl Gane's stand-up is. And I know people are probably going to get really mad because we fed this horse to death at this point, but Ciryl Gane's left kick to the body is awesome. It is so nice. He can whip it out like Luke Rockhold. He can throw it from a roundhouse kick.
I mean, listen, Matt. Whoa!
Wow. Oh my god. I think there was a whole TV show based around that concept at one.
I mean, maybe, you know, there's perfume commercials about it.
No, $1 Million Matchmaker. Luke Rockhold was... Anyways, Charles Jourdain... Charles Jourdain's kicks are very good, though. And when he kicks to the body, they do have a damaging effect. It's not just like he's throwing the kick out there for points and that's it. They slow his opponents down. That's going to be a big point of this fight. Because if Ilia Topuria is happy to go in there and box with Jourdain, especially early, Jourdain is going to put it on him. Or maybe not put it on him, because that would imply like it's all one-sided, but you get the idea. They're going to have 50-50 exchanges because Jourdain is so fast on the feet. My issue is, even if you think Jourdain on his best day has the stand-up of Ilia Topuria, he doesn't have the takedown defense, the jiu-jitsu defense, the really grappling game or the wrestling game to just keep up with the overall package of Ilia Topuria. And like you said, the UFC puts out whatever their version of their awards are, but ESPN did their own, and it was top 25 fighters under the age of 25. You know who's number 1 on that list? Song Yadong. You know who was number 2 on that list? Ilia Topuria.
Who turns 25 on Friday before the fight. So, hey, that one works out in his favor.
But it tells you, like, most of the time we talk about fighters who are younger than 25, they're very exciting, they have eye-catching talent, but they don't have the fight IQ to really put it all together and make a convincing prospect out of themselves. Ilia Topuria, when you watch him fights like somebody who has 30 professional fights because he's so technically sound. He uses his boxing to get into range, which then helps his wrestling game. Everything he does has synergy together, and that's what I love about Ilia Topuria's MMA game.
Ilia Topuria, to me, when Fight Night Picks started, 2018, and again, full disclosure, we are Canadians. If you didn't know it, we are. So for Charles Jourdain, he's a guy that's been on the radar for a long time. Him and his brother, TJ Laramie, and his brother, and then they fight, and then they end up in the UFC, but for those guys in Canada, it is a big deal. We really like to pay attention to those prospects. But the thing for Ilia Topuria, for me, I was getting into Fight Night Picks 2018, and I thought, listen, I really have to branch out. It can't just be the UFC. I got to watch all these different organizations. So I went, okay. At the time, it was ACB. I got to tune into all those shows Saturday morning. Then after that's done, I got to watch Cage Warriors. Ilia Topuria takes on Brian Boulon. Everybody from Cage Warriors saying, this Boulon guy, he is definitely good on the feet. He's a good grappler. You got to watch out for him. But Topuria is a guy that can make some noise. Topuria goes in there, makes Boulon look like an amateur, takes the belt, and then never fights again with Cage Warriors and just goes away. So that was an odd move, but I was always kind of interested to see, okay, how's Topuria going to make out? So then he goes over to Brave, and he beats Luis Gomez, a guy who is probably thinking weird things about Michael Bisping's YouTube channel and the way it's gone. But no, he fights Luis Gomez, not Luis Gomez. Then he fights Steven Goncalves and knocks him out. Comes into the UFC, beats Yusuf Zalal, made him look like not much of a wrestler. Then he goes out there and beats Damon Jackson, knocks him out, and he knocks out Ryan Hall. The point of all of this is two contrasting styles. Will Jourdain grapple? Sometimes, but he's not a great grappler. Trains out of Brazilian top team Canada, Montreal, who are known for grappling, so you're going to get better at it there, but he's not a grappler. Ilia Topuria is a great boxer and a great grappler. Like, we're talking Hall of Fame badge level grappling. So when I look at the odds at open, because originally this was supposed to be Movsar Evloev and Ilia Topuria, which was a totally different matchup, because Movsar can strike, but he strikes to grapple and chain everything together. So when you look at it here, Topuria open a minus 350. He's a minus 534 average on best fight odds. Jourdain open at plus 285. He's plus 393. And if we look on Tapology, the votes aren't close at all. 516 total votes and 94% Topuria. 46% by knockout, 23% by submission. For the 6% that I was Jourdain, 42% by decision, 45% by knockout. But Matt, when I look at this one, the one thing that I haven't said, Jourdain is so good at striking. He can switch stances. His body kick's good. His boxing is very good. His leg kicks are great. His defensive grappling's not good, and his initial attempt at defending takedowns is pretty poor, and that's the biggest detriment against a guy like Topuria.
It 100% is, but I'm going to zag just slightly here. I think this is a way harder fight than Topuria than most people, because Topuria hasn't fought anybody who's a danger to him on the feet in a very meaningful period of time. Damon Jackson offers zero threat on the feet to a guy like Topuria. None whatsoever. Ryan Hall, the exact same thing. They have no power, and you can just walk them down and march them down with your pressure. Jourdain, you can't fight like that. If you just walk towards him thinking, okay, the second we get into boxing range, we're going to be able to go body shot, head shots, and take him down, he's going to hit you with more counters than you can count, and he's probably going to hurt you with each and every one of those. I just don't see this being an all Ilia Topuria type of a fight, because Jourdain does get tired as the fight goes on. He does fight at such a high pace, but it is a massive storm that you have to weather to finally get to that point, and we've never seen Topuria do that. This is my whole point about Ciryl Gane. I don't believe in a prospect until I either see them get dropped or lose like a couple rounds in a fight, because that's where you really learn about who you are. It's fine when the going's good to be throwing behind the back passes like LaMelo Ball when you're up by 20, but when the game's tied, when you're down by 5 and then you come back by doing stuff like that, that's when we really see who you are. I think this is the fight that finally gets sort of the more casual audience on board with Ilia Topuria if he is able to win, because I think this is going to be a fight of the night style fight. I do. I think Jourdain is going to test Topuria in a few areas we didn't think he was going to, but I think ultimately Topuria is probably going to win out.
Jourdain does a great job, especially if he's backed up against the cage and his opponent gets head position and they get an underhook. He's good at reversing it and spinning out of those positions, but against those double and single legs, he's not so good at defending his hips. So for me, I do like Ilia Topuria in this fight. I don't think he's going to hot dog it and catch it behind the back. I don't think he's going to, who am I trying to go with here? Ricky Henderson, where he's going to catch the ball and tap it against his pant leg and run into the dugout. I think we're going to get a very good performance here out of the Georgian fighter, Ilia Topuria, to carry that banner, because Giga Chikadze wasn't able to last weekend. So both of us going with George's Ilia Topuria in this fight. You let us know down below in the comments section if you have our country's own Charles Jourdain, Mr. Air Jourdain, to get the win. It should be an amazing fight, and I can't wait for it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. An interesting fight. At 135 pounds, we have a guy who was the unranked champ before Sean O'Malley in this division, and that is Raoni Barcelos. He's taking on La Mangusta. It is Victor Henry. And listen, we talked about this fight a number of weeks ago, because Raoni Barcelos is one of those guys that nobody wants to fight, and whether they don't or the fight falls out, it seems to happen a lot to Raoni Barcelos. So he gets what he takes, and he takes Victor Henry on short notice. Now, Henry out, there's COVID protocols and such, so they moved this card UFC 270. We talked about this fight in extensive detail, so we'll throw it on back to that video, update the odds, and give you a final pick and prediction on this one. Absolute banger of a fight. Coming up this weekend, we have Josh Barnett's guy. We have La Mangusta, Victor Henry, coming in here on short notice, replacing Trevin Jones, taking on Raoni Barcelos. Matt, when I look at this fight, it reminds me of one of my favorite songs right now. It's called The Payback by James Brown. And at the start of the song, I'm not going to do a James Brown impression, but it goes, hey, gotta pay back. Revenge. I'm mad. Gotta get back. And you know why? Because for Raoni Barcelos, you look at the tape, this guy hadn't lost in 7 years and 9 fights. And listen, Sean O'Malley thinks it's the thing du jour to go, I'm the, what is it? The unranked champ. Well, that's cool, and that's cute. I have 2 Brazilians that were unranked champs forever. Leonardo Santos at 155 before his last 2 fights, and Raoni Barcelos before he took on Timur Valiev. And if you want to get crazy about that fight, Raoni knocked down Timur twice in the second round. That's a 10-8, and he would have had a draw, but it's a majority decision because one judge scored at 28-28, and the other 2 scored at 29-28 for Valiev. And that was the trouble. Barcelos kind of gave away the first round. In the second round, he goes ham, and then in the third round, Raoni didn't have the steam left. So for me, it was very disappointing, I guess, when you look at that fight, because Raoni, again, another favorite, another big opportunity, another one where who wants to fight him? When you are the uncrowned champ of the unranked fighters, nobody wants to fight you. Raoni's one of those guys. Now, for him, Trevin Jones wanted that fight. Victor Henry ultimately gets it. And the craziest part about this, these guys are 3 days apart in birthdays. How crazy is that?
It really is insane. Like, when we put on our graphics, this is their UFC debut, this is their MMA debut, this is their birthday. This caught me very much off guard because, A, Raoni was always that fighter who I said if he was only 3 years younger, you know, if we had 3 more years of his prime, then maybe he finally could reach those heights that maybe we set for him, or maybe the ones that he rightfully achieved on his own, because Barcelos is, like you said, he was that unranked king.
He was supposed to fight, again, before that fight that he had his last time out to lose, he was supposed to fight Marab, he was supposed to fight Rafael Sansa, who was also on this card, and he was supposed to fight Marcelo Rojo. But going into that last booking with Rojo, Barcelos got COVID Then it was delayed, and then he had the fight against Valiev. I just wonder, at the age, with the COVID, I just wonder if there are any lasting effects based on the cardio in that fight.
I do worry a little bit, but we do famously say, like, every single one of these videos that you can't really, like, say much about it. That's true. This is my issues with Raoni Barcelos, and then these are all the reasons why I'm definitely going to pick him this weekend.
I got a page of notes on Victor Henry.
Perfect. With Raoni, he almost had like the Jourdain, formerly known as Calderwood, now would happen to him, where he was promised this ranked opportunity all these times. He ends up not getting the ranked opponent, and then he lost, similar to Jennifer Maia, when she took on Calderwood. Calderwood was promised the title shot, thought, no, I'll get there anyways, I'll stay busy in the meantime, and ended up coming short. Now, this is a very, very important fight, because like you would set it up, it's revenge time for Raoni Barcelos. Like, this is when you either go out there and you destroy Victor Henry in the first 2 minutes because you are that borderline top 15 guy fighting a guy on a week's notice, or we do start to see the cracks in your game. We do see a 34 going on 35-year-old at bantamweight who, like you mentioned, is coming off COVID. There are a lot of question marks around Raoni Barcelos.
COVID before the Valiev fight.
Exactly. But what I do like about Barcelos is that he has a very unique game for this division. He's got phenomenal Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I could talk about that for ages, but he's got great striking to back it up. He's one of those unique fighters, though, who, if his wrestling was 10% better, he probably would be in the top 15 already, because if he had that one transition to, okay, maybe you're a little bit better than me at striking, fine, that's no big deal. My jiu-jitsu will win out. Or if there were other guys, I guess I can't really name many, who have the jiu-jitsu credibility of a guy like Barcelos, but you get the idea. If his wrestling was just a little bit better, then I think he already would have had that opportunity. And that's why this fight's going to be so interesting against who, like you said, Josh Barnett's guy, Victor Henry, finally getting this opportunity.
Well, this is the craziest part about it. So you always hear about Machida Karate, you hear about Lyoto training in California, he's got Shinzo, but at the same time he trains at King's MMA, and I could go on and on about Rafael Cordero and everybody else that trains at King's. But then there's another gym. There's CMMA, California Mixed Martial Arts and Fitness, and that's where Victor Henry trains. He's a coach, and he's also the team captain. Now, we've heard of coaches and team captains. Daniel Cormier is probably the most popular of them, but that's where Victor Henry trains with. And you know who's one of the #1 guys that he trains with, and the reason I make the Machida connection? He trains with Weber Almeida, the prospect that you should definitely be paying attention to over with Bellator, because Weber Almeida is a wicked striker, and he has a great ground game of his own. He is the next Machida if Goto Yamauchi wasn't for me. But I look at this fight where Victor Henry's a guy that competes with Quintet, and I have a lot of different examples of that. But this is a guy that's well-traveled in not a way that most people from California travel, because he's competed extensively in Japan. He's had plenty of fights with Pancrase, with Deep, also with Ryzen, and you look at the fights over there. I mean, he fights, who is it? The Anzac fighter in Trent Girdham, finishes him in the 3rd round. Trent's a striker. Still a good way to draw that fight out, win it that way. Fights Masanori Kanehara, a guy who has a win over Alex Caceres in the UFC. What does he do in that fight? Did you watch that fight?
I did.
1st round, gets taken down, gets pretty well dominated. Now, it was a little bit like Poirier in the guard in the first bit, and then at the end, Kanehara gets the back, and listen, it goes from round to round, but I went, oh boy. For this jiu-jitsu player in Victor Henry, a guy, he's superb at jiu-jitsu. Like, both of these guys actually match up very, very well together with Barcelos and Henry. There's little intangibles that make differences, but for style, this makes for a great fight. And if you look at that Kanehara fight, okay, he gives up the positions, then he gets his back taken. 2nd round comes out, he goes right cross, knockdown, finishes the fight, and then just lets out a yelp. So
he has a very short memory, and that's a great thing to have in MMA. They tell you that in sports your whole life growing up. Have a short memory. If something bad happened, just forget about it. Move on from that. That's a great thing that Victor Henry has been able to show.
Last fight out, wins the LXF Bantamweight Championship over Albert Morales. Well, he was in the UFC. Pretty good there. He also lost to Patchy Mix and Bellator. But Albert Morales has that pedigree of fights that you want. And that fight was a brawl. He has 2 fights against Denis Lavrentiev over with Paris FC, as well as RCC. 1 win, 1 loss, both by decision. But Matt, the fights that made a lot of sense to me. He has a knockout win over Anderson Dos Santos before Dos Santos went to the UFC. Before that,
we talked about a lot for having a padded record, but
beat Kyler Phillips by split decision after Kyler was off of his fight from Contender Series, the Ultimate Fighter. I mean, still, by split, that means something. And then Yuki Matoyo was another one of those ones that I looked at and went, he has had an impact on MMA. So I look at it, He beats Kanehara in MMA. He loses to him over with Quintet, but I absolutely love everything that I've seen. The evolution in his game, the little tricks that he's been able to bring in, and I think he's one of those veterans that you're not just going to see for one fight, two fight. I think you're going to see 4 or 5 from Victor Henry in the UFC.
I've got bad news, though. He's making his UFC debut on, what, 5 days notice against Raoni Barcelos? 6 days?
It's not a lot of days.
It's not a lot of days, and this is my problem. Even if I think you would have a very good shot with a full training camp, you don't have a full training camp, and that's the issue. Raoni Barcelos truly is the 16th ranked bantamweight, or he was at least for a short little period of time, and I do believe that he's going to get back on track. I think the guy who fought his last fight was maybe not, I don't want to say over-aggressive or over-emotional, but you could tell that he thinks he belongs in the top 15, and I think he sees this as a great opportunity to sort of reintroduce himself to the average MMA fan. And you mentioned this, but it has to be said again, you can't really look at this as like a prospect coming in. Henry, not only is it a prospect, but he's only 3 days younger and he's had more pro fights. So I don't look at him being the much fresher guy who hasn't taken a lot of damage because, again, and I'm glad you brought it up, Henry will make fights closer than they probably should be at some points throughout his fights, and that does worry me. He will get into brawls sometimes and then shoot for the takedown. He will take some ground and pound and then try to escape. There's always sort of a process in one of his matchups where he's the one taking damage, and I do not like that being one of your skills when you're fighting a guy like Barcelos.
If Barcelos tries to take this one down to the mat, nope. And I like Raoni on the ground. I do not like him on the ground against Victor Henry, man. You watch the way this guy's able to transition, sweep out of bad positions. He is one of those guys. So for Barcelos, he's a guy that fought, you know, again, some of those unranked guys, padded his record, fought guys that, you know, he was supposed to beat, but he beat them in impressive fashion. And if you go back and you watch some of his fights, to me, that Kyle Taha fight, you want to get excited about Raoni Barcelos, and this fight in particular against Victor Henry, I think that's the perfect fight to watch. Or Victor Henry goes out there, pitter-patters with a little bit of a volume game, and you look at the Timur Valiev fight, which was incredibly close, and you can see certain paths to victory. So when I look at this one in the odds now, Barcelos open a -350 favorite. He's a -417. For Henry, open a +285. He's a +315. And we look at the Tapology votes, Matt. Surprise to us there, to everybody out there. I'm going to set the over-under at 80% Barcelos.
I'm going to say over.
You're going to say over? Look at that. 852 total votes. 92% Barcelos. 75% by decision for the 8% that have Henry. 47% by decision. 25% by knockout. It is tough to beat pitter-patter Barcelos, especially when he brings in his wrestling. That's going to be the interesting part that plays into Victor Henry's game with his jiu-jitsu. So I can't wait for this fight. I think it's going to be a great one.
This should be a great fight. And the point I want to bring up about Raoni Barcelos is that to me, he feels a little bit like Mirbek Taisumov, where there was a portion throughout the prime of his career where there was always a by the way. And I understand for very different reasons for both fighters, but they were kind of robbed of many of their prime years in the UFC. And then when they were able to get some sort of a regular schedule, it was past when they were at their peak. And with Barcelos, maybe he is past his peak. Maybe his last fight was against a really talented fighter, which is more what I believe in. But with Barcelos, it will be interesting because if he does lose this fight, then I feel like prime Raoni Barcelos is dead and gone. But if he is able to beat Victor Henry, which I expect him to be able to do, he's got to get a top 15 opponent at some point, just based off principles. Like, Mike Conley was an all-star last year, even though he probably didn't deserve it. It was just like, hey, you were really good for like 15 years. We'll give you one just so you can have this. For Raoni Barcelos, there has to be like a lifetime achievement top 15 opponent for him.
It's like Nick Suzuki last year. Bring the Canadians to the Cup final. You're an all-star this year because it's a participation award. And I'm a Canadians fan to say that. When I look at this one, there's a couple of things I have to say. Mirbek Taisumov loves wearing an American flag New York Yankees hat on Instagram all the time.
Weird.
It's all he wears, and it's weird that I know that, but it's true. Go look at it. But when I look at this fight, I think Barcelos is just a step ahead in almost every area. If Victor Henry goes out there, gets a front choke, man, that would be awesome, but I just don't necessarily see it happening. So for me, I also have Barcelos in this fight, but the odds are too cooked for me to make any play on this one. Both of us going with Brazil's Barcelos to get the win, and we have a great card coming up. If you like this fight between a couple of very dynamic bantamweights, check out the co-main event between Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo. It is movement and volume at the highest level at 125, and in the main event, Gane looking to unify that belt, taking on former teammate Francis Ngannou. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Big time fight coming up this weekend at middleweight. We have an interesting clash between Wellington Turman taking on Rodolfo Vieira, and there's a reason why you don't speak in absolutes in MMA ever, because we talk about it. You can hit a 6-run grand slam to win a baseball game. You can hit a 25-point half-court shot in MMA specifically. And for Rodolfo Vieira, his nickname's the Black Belt Hunter. And when you take on a guy that's in the purple belt category, like Alexander Hernandez, and you medal in world grappling tournaments, you're supposed to beat that fighter. But there's one little key that takes all of that away. Well, for Rodolfo, it's cardio. And his striking is interesting because Rodolfo Vieira is a guy that wings power shots to close the distance, to just grab you and take you to the mat. Now, he has double legs, he has single legs, but he uses his body weight to take guys down. And it's a little bit different than, you know, TJ Dillashaw, 135, using technique and body movement. He is one of those guys that uses brute strength along with skills to get takedowns. And for Vieira, that really played out in his second to last fight when he took on a man they call Fluffy, Anthony Hernandez. So he comes out in his last fight against Dustin Stuyvesant, and he didn't play that game. Played it a lot safer. And in that fight, there were little improvements in just overall technique and fight IQ that you could see Rodolfo using, to where first round, not going to expend my gas tank, but I'm not going to give up too much ground. Second round, not going to expend my gas tank, not going to give up too much ground. In the third round, okay, I'm going to flick that switch, I'm going to finish this fight, and Rodolfo was able to do exactly that. Now, did he take down Stuyvesant before that? Sure he did, but it was in that third round that he was able to get it done. It was something that we hadn't seen before, the likes of his fight against Saperbeg Safarov, one of Matt's favorite fighters, against Oscar Piota, Cage Warrior's biggest and brightest prospect.
This has to be said, Craig, I'm sorry. Rodolfo Vieira, for as exciting of a prospect as he is, has had one of the weakest 4-fight runs in recent UFC memory.
Yeah, the weirdest part about it is, let's focus on the competition, because fit the last fight, Vitaly Nemchinov, he just goes across the cage, double leg takedown, and, you know, ends up getting the back, gets the finish. That's over with ACA, not with the UFC. Then he fights Oscar Piota, a guy who gassed against Gerald Meerschaert and got submitted, which is fun. And then he beats Saperbeg Safarov, a guy who had an interesting fight with Jean Volante one time, loses to Hernandez, and then beats Stuyvesant. Rodolfo Vieira's in that category where we're outside of the top 15, we're knocking on the door, we're banging, we're having fun, but eventually that ends. So he's got to have he's got to pitch a perfect game against Wellington Turman, a guy who can strike against guys that aren't strikers and can grapple against guys that aren't grapplers. But if he does either of those things against somebody who's good at it, he's come out on the losing end of the UFC. The 5-on-in, lost split to Carl Robertson, beats Maluco Marcus Perez, loses to Andrew Sanchez and gets knocked out. Gets knocked out by Bruno Silva in a fight where it's like Nate Diaz in that press conference where he was talking about Conor McGregor's movement coach. You're just out there playing touch butt in the park with that dork. Wellington Turman was playing touch butt in the park because he had grappled with Bruno Silva in the past. So then they grapple in that fight, and then Bruno goes, we're not doing this anymore. I'm knocking you out, pal. So he knocks him out, and then Wellington's last time out, he beats Sam Alvey by split decision. A feat that's been going on since the dawn of time, it seems.
Okay, basically this is the fight that we've set up. Wellington Turman barely beat Sam Alvey, who's lost about 7 fights in a row in the UFC. And Rodolfo Vieira has worse cardio than guys who smoke cigarettes in high school do. They both have glaring holes in their game.
But usually those guys fight in the parking lot, right?
That's true, and sometimes they even become glory champions in Joe Schilling's case. Like, there is a ceiling to having that as a background. With Rodolfo Vieira, I agree with you that he did make some improvements in his last fight, but his whole game still comes down to, can he get a power double leg and can you take your back off of that? Because I don't think he can go out there and play a pitter-patter striking game with Wellington Turman, no matter how weak Turman's stand-up is. He's not a great technician on the feet, but he's at least steady for 15 minutes. It's kind of like the Jake Collier, Chase Sherman, where, hey, are these guys eye-catching on the feet? No, but they're at least steady for 15 minutes. That's kind of how I look at Turman. He's probably not going to go out there and get some eye-catching TKO, but he can work behind the jab, he can set up his leg kicks, he can do enough to at least make Rodolfo Vieira uncomfortable on the feet, and that's going to be the big key, because if you can make Rodolfo uncomfortable on the feet, all those muscles look really good in your Instagram pictures. They don't really help with striking defense. They hurt your cardio a lot. And in MMA, there are some drawbacks. Like, not everybody's built like Francis Ngannou and has a successful career based on it. There's a reason that the ideal MMA build isn't just being big and jacked. Like, Brandon Moreno is one of the best fighters in the world, and he just looks like a regular guy. Like, muscles aren't always this big advantage in MMA, but with Rodolfo, I still think his whole game comes down to, can he get the takedown, and can he use that to get to his submission, whether it's the first or the third round? Because if he does commit himself to that game plan early, then he's going to tire out in the second round, and he's probably just going to get outstruck on his way to a terribly boring decision. But if he gets that one takedown, I do expect him to get the submission.
Yeah, when I look at this fight, I mean, Wellington, I disagree slightly. I mean, I think for a guy who, you take that A in the last name and you're just taking it, like the Las Vegas is going to take Oakland. We're just taking those A's. So Turman, for me, for a 25-year-old guy to have 22 pro fights, nothing he's done in the UFC has surprised me or made me go, man, this guy's a top 15 talent. I think Vieira has a little bit more of that quality. Now, do we see specialists normally go on to have giant success in these divisions?
Adesanya.
No. Adesanya is a very good striker, but at the same time, he has takedown defense at 185. At 205, it's a little bit different. But at 185, it'll be interesting to see. Does he have the big time movement? Is he going to have that Pereira type to him where he can take that grappling all the way up to the top? That remains to be seen. But in this fight, you look at it, and man, he is a favorite in this fight. And if you really do focus, open to minus 350, he's a minus 276 right now. For Turman, open to plus 285, he's a plus 222. If we look at Tapology for the total votes, 921 total votes, 93% Vieira, 80% by submission. For the 7% that have Turman, 49% by decision, 29% by knockout. I mean, the odds makers have Vieira, the fans have Vieira. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. I've been fooled on Rodolfo Vieira to the point where I made a promo pack before his fight against Fluffy Hernandez, telling people about how good Rodolfo Vieira is. I still think he's good, but my inherent bias is still there, so I have to say that out of the gate. I don't like Wellington Turman's takedown defense, and I don't like how comfortable he is on the ground once he gets there. For those reasons, I have Rodolfo Vieira in this fight. If the first round is a striking affair, then maybe I change my mind on the live odds, but I do like Vieira here.
Vieira's so uncomfortable on the feet, it's not even funny. It really is like that kind of deer in headlights type thing, and he doesn't react well to getting hit either. I know, no one likes getting hit in the head, but like Brock Lesnar really put this in MMA fans' minds that like heart and toughness do matter at a certain point. If you hate getting hit in the head, MMA is probably not the sport for you. And with Vieira, you can tell he panics when he gets hit and when he gets damaged. It was the Safarov fight. His eye swells up, looks disgusting, and you can tell like there is a serious look of panic in his face to where he's like, okay, I need to get this takedown right now, because if I don't, the doctor's going to stop it. I do like that urgency out of Vieira, even though I don't like his striking defense whatsoever, so I'm going to pick Rodolfo, but I'm going to say this right now. The well is going to dry up very soon for him. You can't be a specialist like him and make it very far in MMA because the cardio is such a big disadvantage. Because I think you can be a specialist and be fine in MMA. I really do. Like, Wonderboy Thompson and Damian Maia almost fought for the welterweight title against each other, and that would have been cool. It would have been like a throwback, you know, like, oh, one guy's all stand-up, one guy's all grappler. I just thought of this. If Rodolfo wins this weekend, do you think we could get Rodolfo versus Alex Pereira as like the ultimate just grappler versus just striker? I think that'd be a fun fight.
It will never happen. And Pereira already has a fight on the horizon. But for Rodolfo Vieira, he's one of those guys, and you talked about Brock Lesnar. If you go back and watch him fight Alistair Overeem, Overeem starts to back him up, and then Brock just kind of gets confused, and he's starting to back up into the cage, and Overeem just starts to unload on him. Or even the Cain Velasquez fight. With Rodolfo, you hit him, and he just kind of shells up, and it's almost like his game plan is totally thrown out of flux. And when he's on the offensive, I did that to be funny earlier, but it's just jab, jab. No right hand behind it, just jab. We're throwing that out there. I like Vieira because of his jiu-jitsu, but if this takes place in the striking, not that Wellington Turman is that great at striking, but I think it's, if the Oakland A's ever did go to Vegas, we're taking off, we're going to the moon. So I think for Turman, he could go to the moon with his striking, and I never thought I'd say that. So again, Both of us going with Vieira here.
Yeah, but if Turmod can keep this on the feet, he should be able to win a decision.
All right, Matt. Both of us going with Rodolfo Vieira in the Battle of Brazil. We're taking the black belt Hunter. You let us know down below in the comments section. Have the Wolf tickets been sold? Is this Wolf Cola on Vieira at a Boca Raton? It is going to be an interesting weekend coming up. And in the main event, unifying the heavyweight strap, we have Gane taking on Ngannou. Let's keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
Let's get into it.
Oh, hello. You've caught me in my bathroom, the last room to get renovated in my house. And listen, I'm hanging out here and looking at my favorite products that I have in the bathroom. No, I'm not talking about the paint. I'm not talking about the sanding pad. I'm talking about Manscaped. And with me, I have the Ultra Premium Cologne Fragrance Refined. It is the body wash. I also have the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner, but that's not all. Listen, walk with me. We're going to go a little bit through the house. I'm turning the lights off. We'll walk into the office. You guys have seen the office before. This is a little bit of cribs. Yeah, I finished the office. Yeah, I got black paint in here and white shelves. But here, let's throw it on over and you'll get the regular view into what we're doing. All right, so now we're back. We're in the office, and I'm here to tell you that roses are red and violets are blue, but don't let a wild pube wreck you. Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and our sponsors at Manscaped are here for you with the best tools to get your balls ready for the special occasion, the V-Day. It's time to join the 4 million men worldwide that trust Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming, with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use the code FNP for 20% off and free shipping. Now listen, clean balls around Valentine's Day are probably the most important point that you can have, and there's a couple of different ways you can go about it, Matt. You're going to want to listen to this part. There are 2 things that I have in my arsenal that can really help me. Actually, there's more. The body wash. You got to keep things clean. I mean, listen, there's people out there, and they're washing, and they're just going, you know what? I'm going to take that old tired bar soap that I've had for a long time that I picked up at the dollar store.
It's like Ashton Kutcher. He doesn't wash his legs, and that's really weird. But with the Manscaped body wash, you never have to worry about that.
Allegedly. Allegedly.
I'm not there. I'm just saying, look into it.
But if you're going about life that way, or if you're one of those people that, listen, I just lather on a little bit of soap, I'm going to let it wash off, and then I'm going to try and impress on Valentine's Day, you might get met with a look like this on the other side. I guess. And there's a couple of other things that you can use. The Crop Reviver Ball Toner. This is one of those ones that when it's Sunday, I'm sitting down, I'm getting ready to tape. I'm going to have a shower. I'm using the products that I've been given by our sponsor, Manscaped, because it's a sponsor. But I'm going to the little bit of Crop Reviver Ball Toner. I'm standing there. I'm already dried. Everything's nice and dry, high and tight. Then a couple of sprays on there. Let that one dry. And then I know that I'm good to go for the day. And if I really need to pour it on a little bit more, then I'm going to go with the Crop Preserver Ball Toner. Matt, hold that bottle for a second. Gross.
I don't want to, yeah.
Not as heavy as it was when I got it,
no,
right?
You're going to need some more.
It's definitely been used, and that's the thing. I mean, when you're looking at it, the holidays, they went by so quickly. Did you remember to take care of your package with the best tools for the job? Because if you pick up the Performance Package 4.0, you're going to end up with the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant. You're going to end up with the Crop Reviver, but there's 2 more tools in here. The Lawnmower 4.0, we talk about it every week. Now, chances are you're going to like that light. You're going to want to clean things up. And if you're traveling, 1, 2, 3, boom, 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 LEDs are going up. You got the travel lock as well. The other nice thing about this, not just specific to Valentine's Day, but you're going to have to clean this out at some point. Look, one hand, one finger. I pop the top off. I can clean any unwanted hair in there. I can grease up the motor if I need to. Those are things that, to me, being a guy that actually values service, I care about stuff like that. The other thing that they have in the performance
You must
package,
be so much fun at parties.
the weed whacker. I used to play Limelight by Rush at parties, and I ruined them.
And that's how...
The weed
You're
whacker,
home a lot, I noticed.
The weed whacker, look at that. I can clean it up. I can pop the top off. I can put it back on. And then, as you know, week after week, get in there. You can hear that sucker working because I have a nose hair problem. But overall, I mean, Manscaped, they've been on this journey for about a year now with Fight Night Picks. And if you go to Manscaped for our exclusive offer, 20% off and free shipping with the code FNP, your balls and lady or gentleman will thank you. Whoever's there with you on Valentine's Day, doesn't matter who, they're probably going to enjoy it, Matt. I know this is something that really means a lot to you. The fans supporting the sponsor help support the show. It really does mean a lot to us. But if you're giving out any Valentine's Day grooming tips, do you have just one?
Just make sure you're, well kept, high and tight, Let's say you're going out for some drinks, you have some plans later on in the evening. No one wants stuff all over the place. Just make sure you keep things high and tight.
Wash off after the fact.
Good call.
The body wash.
Don't be like Ashton Kutcher.
And you also don't want any residual hair that you've just trimmed off. So get 20% off and free shipping with code FNP at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code FNP. Join Cupid and shoot your arrow with Manscaped this Valentine's Day. We have an awesome pay-per-view card coming up this weekend. The Fight Companion, question mark kicks, and a wicked main card that you're not going to want to miss. Just keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.
Representing Lions Fight BJJ and Akhmat Fight Club, we have Said Nurmagomedov making his return to the UFC to take on renowned wrestling stud Cody Stamann, a guy who has built his entire game on the fact that he can take you down, hold you down, and hold you down some more. So for Cody Stamann, he has his work cut out for him because a guy like Said Nurmagomedov, you look at it even in his last fight, he's taken on Philippines' own Mark Striegel, a guy who has a Sambo background, who can take guys down, control them, submit them. That was Striegel's whole game. And oh, by the way, he's a pretty good striker too, but very compact at 135. He goes in for a takedown attempt against Nurmagomedov. Nurmagomedov says, I'm going to throw a hook out there, knock him down, and then just as he holds onto his leg in that takedown, just brutalizes him. So a giant win for Nurmagomedov. But the oddest thing for me when I did this whole kind of deep dive on Ciryl Nurmagomedov, I went, hey, he's been in the UFC for a long time. He's actually been in the UFC for almost 4 years. He's 29 right now. He's only had 4 fights. It's been giant periods of inactivity. He didn't fight at all last year. His UFC wins over Justin Scoggins, Ricardo Ramos, that ages like a fine wine in a battle of prospects at the time. A loss to Raoni Barcelos, where it was just Barcelos' work rate, his takedowns, and everything all together that was able to get him the win there. And then Striegel to Cody Stamann, who's been there, done that, and on the periphery and in right now, the top 15 for a very long time.
This is such a fun fight in the bantamweight division because this division is arguably the most exciting in the UFC right now. I would say it's 135, 45, and 55. Those three are normally kind of at the peak for where your talent is. But Cody Stamann is, we know what Cody Stamann's going to do. He's going to wrestle, be it single legs or double legs. But the good thing about Stamann is that he does have a wide variety of takedown attempts. He's not somebody who only has a single leg takedown and a couple variations and that's it, and they sink or swim based on that one technique. He has a very wide variety of wrestling techniques in his back pocket that he can go to. But my problem with Stamann is that in this division, there's been a lot of kind of wrestle boxers just throughout the history of the division. Some guys like Jimmy Rivera, who might side a little bit more towards the boxing end, and then some guys like Ricky Simone, who might side a little bit more towards the wrestling end, until lately he's been adding a lot more of the striking end. Cody Stamann's never really added the striking element to his game, and I've always wondered as to when he will make that jump.
Well, and that's weird too, because again, if you look on Topology or just Cody Stamann when he was early in the UFC, Michigan top team, Michigan wrestling, so on and so forth. Jim Harbaugh, is that adjacent? But no, when you look at it, he was always the Michigan guy. And then he goes to Extreme Couture. He's been there for a long time. And yeah, to me, the one fight where I thought that he had added a little bit more into his boxing, maybe you want to say the Merab fight, but even before that, the fight against Brian Kelleher, it was okay. His boxing is starting to get a little bit more crisp. He's starting to throw more combinations. It's not just one shot overhand and then I'm just ducking my levels and looking for the takedown. It was a little bit more, but against a guy like Nurmagomedov, I doubt you see that.
I agree 100%. He has made some improvements, but my issue with Stamann is that when you look at his striking compared to the other guys in the top 15 of this division, Song Yadong barely cracks the top 15 of this division, and I think we all know what he's capable of doing on the feet. Sean O'Malley is another guy who, he's barely in the top 15 if he is at all right now, and his striking is at such a level to where every second on the feet with him, you're at a chance of getting knocked out. With Stamann, there's no threat behind what he's throwing at you on the feet. He has some of the volume, but really everything he's doing is to set up his wrestling, and in this fight against Nurmagomedov, I think Stamann can get takedowns, but I wonder how his ability to secure the takedown is going to look, because if he can't ever get Nurmagomedov flat on his back, then Said's just going to be able to scramble and scramble and scramble, because with Nurmagomedov, he doesn't really fight like Khabib. He's sort of the midway point between Zabit and Khabib. He can wrestle a little bit, but he still throws a lot of spinning kicks. He found the Goldilocks zone between the two, but he does have those great scrambles, and it's so hard to hold him down. Raoni Barcelos did have success with his grappling, but it was also the pace that he was able to put on Nurmagomedov along with the grappling. It's going to be very interesting to see if Cody Stamann went back and watched the Barcelos fight and thinks, okay, I can replicate some of that game plan, or if Stamann's going to think, I'm just going to wrestle, because oddly enough, I think if Stamann is too dedicated to his own wrestling, he might find himself at the disadvantage in the cardio side, because I think if Nurmagomedov can give up a couple takedowns just to scramble and end up on top, he's going to be wasting a lot less energy throughout this fight. But again, that's going to require him to somehow scramble and get on top of Cody Stamann, whose whole MMA game is built around getting guys down to the mat and just holding them there.
We'll see how Nurmagomedov makes out as well, because the fight against Striegel was over on Fight Island in 2020. He was inactive last year.
Striegel was out of his element.
Yeah, he was, 100%. But if you do look at it, he was booked in a fight against Jack Shore last year, had to withdraw. They say due to visa issues, the ACMAT Fight Club thing is the reason why I go, ugh. But in 2022, last week, he had a picture on Instagram. He was at Lions Fight BJJ with Zaruk Adashev, which is in New York. So if he's in the States, shouldn't really be that big of an issue. That's just the one caveat that I had to throw out there. The other thing, too, about Nurmagomedov, and I'm going to talk about historic odds in the UFC, and then this, and we'll make the pick. He was a minus 140 favorite against Scoggins. He was a plus 140 underdog against Hamos. He was a minus 125 favorite against Barcelos. He was a minus 410 favorite against Striegel. In this fight, Nurmagomedov opened a minus 245. He's a minus 261 right now on Sunday night. For Stamann, open a plus 210. He's a plus 166. I would say over-under on Topology for the fan vote, 75% Nurmagomedov. You saying over-under?
I think Stamann's going to be the favorite.
Not a chance. 934 total votes, 82% with Nurmagomedov, 78% have him to win by decision. For the 18% that have Stamann, 88% by decision. So, Matt, the odds favor Nurmagomedov. The fans overwhelmingly have Nurmagomedov. I expect our fans in the comments section to have Nurmagomedov. What are you saying here?
I have no idea, if I'm being completely honest, because here's the thing. Cody Stamann's strength isn't a weakness of Nurmagomedov, but it's something that he does give up in his fights. I've seen Nurmagomedov get taken down. It's not like he is a Khabib or an Islam Makhachev to where it's like, oh wow, I've never seen this happen. Like, we've seen the defensive grappling, again, not be a weak point for him, but he has been susceptible to getting taken down in the past. And against a guy like Cody Stamann, it all depends on what happens after that initial takedown, because if Stamann can just stay on top of him, it's going to be the worst fight you've ever seen, and you're probably going to want your money back in the pay-per-view, because that's the type of game he has. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He's not somebody like a Khabib Nurmagomedov who goes from full guard into mount, beats you into the ground, and tries to submit you. He's more than happy to just waste minutes, waste rounds on top, and that's fine. Like, he is a top 15 ranked fighter in one of the hardest divisions in the UFC, so it's been working for him so far. But if Nurmagomedov can scramble and really use his speed to his advantage, because I think that is his big advantage in this fight, it is the speed, be it on the feet or even with his grappling. So it's going to come down to, do you like the control of Stamann, or do you just like the variety from Nurmagomedov? Right now, I am going to side with the variety of Nurmagomedov, but I'm going to say this. When they face off, if Cody Stamann looks way bigger than Nurmagomedov, and if I do start to feel like Stamann can hold Nurmagomedov down throughout the fight, then I might change my pick, but right now, I'll pick Nurmagomedov.
It is a really tricky one, too. I mean, Cody Stamann, one of the more active guys in not just the bantamweight division, but in all of MMA, with his takedowns, with the variety as well, because another guy on this card, Genaro Valdez, making his UFC debut. He's a guy that strikes wildly, gets into the clinch, and all he has for a takedown that I've seen is a high single leg where he just picks guys up, uses all of his momentum, and then he's able to get it. So Stamann's not one of those guys at all. He picks his shots when he does need to throw, but to me, Nurmagomedov's one of those guys that's tailor-made. I think this fight is going to be a little bit similar to the fight that Song Yadong had against Cody Stamann. Now, that one ended up a draw, but in this one, I think Nurmagomedov is going to be able to get it done enough on the feet to get the win, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's an over over-under out there, 1.5 rounds. I might go with that one out of anything. But for me, I'm going to go with Nurmagomedov and not one of the more confident picks on the card. We're in agreement with Nurmagomedov here. You let us know down below in the comments section who you have between the Russian Nurmagomedov, the American here out of Michigan, Cody Stamann. We got a big-time main card headed at you with 2 title fights up at the top that you're not going to want to miss. Just keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. So last week, Muslim Salikov is supposed to be taking on Michel Pereira in a co-main event to Kattar and Chikadze. Salikov out of the fight. Insert Dominance MMA's own Andrea Fiallo, a prospect, I would say, that a lot of UFC fans or fight fans should have already known. Spent some time over with Bellator, fight Chidi and Joe Kuani, and the joke ends there because for Chidi and Joe Kuani, he wins that fight impressively. He ends up in the UFC after Andrea Fiallo. He had to fight on Contender Series. Fiallo didn't. So the last laugh goes to the Portuguese fighter representing Sanford MMA in Andrea Fiallo. And if you look at it, his 2020 was dog shit. For him, by his own standards, he loses a fight to Chris Curtis that's back and forth. In certain exchanges, he looks great. In the wrestling, he looks great. But ultimately, as that fight wears on, it is Chris Curtis's fight. And in the 3rd round, he really pours it on and ends up getting the win there by ground and pound. So his next time out, he's supposed to take on Zane Kamaka. And in PFL's eyes, he wins that fight. By winning, Zane Kamaka missed weight and couldn't fight. So, listen, Andrea Fiallo gets the points and ends up in the PFL quarterfinals at welterweight, taking on Gleico França. And what happens in that fight? It's actually back and forth, and I scored that fight 19-19. You might go, Craig, you scored a fight 19-19. How does that work? Well, in the quarterfinals, they're 2 rounds because you fight twice in that night. And I had it first round going to França, second fight going to Fiallo because Fiallo rocked him 6 ways to Sunday and almost finished that fight at multiple occasions. França just kind of laid back on his wrestling when he got hurt. And whether you scored it 20-18 or 19-19, none of that matters because while Gleico França did win that fight on that night, he tested positive for stanozolol after that fight, and that got overturned to a no contest. So, our guy Andrea Fiallo goes out there, fights with LFA, takes on UFC veteran Antonio Dos Santos Jr., and in that fight, he has some good boxing. He's taken down some, and he gets beat by decision. Whether you scored that one 29-28 or 30-27, França loses that. So you might go, okay, well, 2 years ago, and we're really, it's a stretch saying 2 years ago for 2020, Andrea Fiallo goes 0-3 for all intents and purposes. Why is he in the UFC? Because he knocked guys dead in 4 fights in 2021, including James Vick, highlighted his great range, patience, and I say that because 2nd round finish over Vick, 1st round over with UAE Warriors. This guy's boxing is second to none in this division. The attention to detail, the head movement, and the use of combinations are so impressive from Andrea Fiallo. That's why he's in the UFC on short notice, and he poses a very, very good risk to Michel Pereira. And just go back to 2 fights if you want to see Pereira kind of wilt under the pressure. His 3rd round in his last fight against Nico Price, when he gets backed up, he loses in those exchanges. And his fight against Duško Todorovic, where Duško goes balls to the wall up against the cage, pre-UFC for either guy, if you want to see a way that Andrea Fiallo can win. But man, this guy's boxing is so much fun to watch, and being represented or representing a gym like Sanford MMA, a great way to get ready for a fight like Pereira, even on short notice.
Hey, 100% would be. But again, this is something that we always go back on when somebody's fighting a very relevant fighter on short notice. It's hard to beat a guy in the top 20 in the UFC with a 2 months training camp. And the fact that you're accepting this fight on genuinely, a week and a half's notice, because it was, 3 days before the last fight night card and then a week later. So on 10 days notice, you're being asked to fight one of the more dynamic strikers in the division. So whatever version of Fiallo you expect, just lessen your expectations by 15% probably, because a training camp really, really does matter, especially against such a unique fighter like Michel Pereira, because he doesn't strike in a very classical type of a way. So normally your training camp is getting you ready for all of his unorthodox attacks. And now that Fiallo hasn't had that time, it's going to be not a shock to him, but it's going to take him a little bit of time to adjust to the unorthodox movements of Michel in the cage. I always go back to when TJ Dillashaw sparred Vasily Lomachenko, and for the first, 2 minutes, he looks pretty good, and it is. He moves really weird, he's doing all that weird hand stuff, but after a couple minutes, Lomachenko's like, okay, you can still only hit me with your 2 hands, the same rules that I'm following, and he starts to break him down. I think early on, Fialho is going to have a lot of trouble with the movement of Michel, but as the fight does progress, if Pereira does start to slow down, then similar to what we saw in last night's main event, if you can slow down the kicker and turn them into a boxer, there's a reason they're in kickboxing and not just in boxing. It's because their hands aren't as good. So if you can crowd the space of a kicker and force them to become a boxer, I think Fialho can have a ton of success.
2 examples of that. So Fialho, again, like a guy like Francis Ngannou, I'm a puncher, but occasionally I'll throw some kicks. And Fialho has very good leg kicks. He doesn't dedicate to them rarely ever, but when he does, they work to great effect. Inside and to the calf. Inside of the knee, outside of the calf. Great job when he does that. And if you want to liken a fight with Pereira to a fight with James Vick, listen, you're going to laugh at me, whatever. Oh, James Vick's got a bad chin. Yeah, he does. That's why he lost the fight against Andrea Fialho. And Fialho threw some really good combinations. The right uppercut, the left hook, they're absolute money. And that's the nice thing about Fialho. Lots of different attacks, lots of different combinations that he can throw. He isn't just dedicated to 1 or 2 things. He'll pump that left jab out there, and then all of a sudden the jab, once you bring your guard up, he'll throw a hook, and when it lands, it looks really good. And for Vick, he had great, in the first round, he had great kicks. He throws that pumping kick to the body, he throws it to the leg, he throws the head kicks. He does a great job of it, but once Fialho kind of figures out the distance, and he does a really good job of not just swiping the kick away from the body, but moving his head and keeping his hand up there to kind of block some of those kicks. Now, when you're facing a very good kicker, doesn't matter how good your hand placement is. Valerie Lareda was a fighter like that. Some fights, she just glues her hand to her head because she got knocked out by Erin Blanchfield, and even then, when people hit you, you're still hitting the head, and you're able to kind of throw some people off. So for Fialho, if I can relay it to a lot of different fighters, like Lareda, like Ngannou, so on and so forth, he is able to do a lot of special things. The real knock against him, in certain fights he can get taken down. He also has very good offensive wrestling, but in his last fight, he took on Stefan Seklic, a guy who 2021 was a weird bag, if you want to call it, for Seklic, where he loses to Dwight Grant, but did he really? After a long layoff. So he gets cut from the UFC. Then he goes out and wins 2 fights. Then he takes on Fialho. Goes to take him down, single leg. Fialho goes, that's cute. Elbow to the head, knocked him down, finished him from there. So Pereira, weird movements. The other thing I have for Pereira, I got to throw the clip up there. You ever watch this guy train on a treadmill? You ever see what he does on Instagram, Matt?
No.
Makes me sick to my stomach. It's disgusting. I hate to see things like that. It's just like guys like Michel Pereira, guys like Rafael Alves. Why are we showboating on the way to the cage? Why are we doing flips in the cage before the fight? There's a chance you could significantly hurt yourself. And for Pereira, he's dancing around.
But we're way more excited for his fight this weekend than we are for unranked welterweights who don't do backflips on their way to the cage. So it does help him a little bit.
It helps him in that respect. It gets the people going. And I can't say the words from that song, but I can like that movie, Blades of Glory. But Matt, when I look at this, I mean, Michel Pereira opened a -250 favorite. He's -304 right now. Fialho opened a +210. He is a +239 at this juncture. We look at the Topology votes for this one. 559 total votes. 85% Pereira. 45% have him to win by decision. 47% have him to win by knockout. For the 15% that have Fialho, 65% by knockout. Matt, I have this to say, and I say this halfway jokingly. Michel Pereira, through all the wildness that has been his UFC career, through all the fun that he has, he's taken on one short notice UFC debutant in a fight of the night that was Tristan Connolly, and he lost that fight. And since then, again, you look at the other fights, he loses to Diego Sanchez, but
he beat him, though, let's be honest.
Joshua Fabian Diego Sanchez won that fight. And then after that, he tamed the wildness. And in the last 3 fights against Salim Imadaev, who was billed as a great Russian boxer, but he wasn't, he's able to get a win. And Michel Pereira not just outstruck him, outgrappled him. He looked amazing in that fight. And his fight against Chaos Williams, it was back and forth. You can make a strong argument either way.
Back and forth is a fancy way of saying bad.
As to who won that fight. And against Nico Price, he had a great first and second round. And then in the third round, and Daniel Cormier hammers away on this point if you listen to the commentary, but it is true. why are you still doing all the wild stuff in the third round? Because he tamed it in the first and the second round. And then in the third round, Pereira backed up behind the black line, reverts to his natural state of, I'm going to throw a flying knee at Niko Price, and it misses. I'm going to throw a head kick from distance, and it misses. Still has those big actions and movements at that default setting to where Niko Price had a really good third round against him in that one.
He did, but the big difference I make between Niko Price and Andre Fiallo is that Fiallo, I don't think, has the staying power of Niko Price, because Niko Price has shown very, very good cardio in the UFC, even after he's been getting beat on for 2 rounds. Like, he... Not again! Luke Rockhold first, now Niko Price. Even when he is accepting a lot of damage, he is still able to have good cardio in the third round. And Niko Price has a response for the kicking range of Pereira to where I don't think Fiallo will. I think Fiallo, like you said, does have some kicks, but doesn't have the body or the head kicks that Niko Price has at long range, to where Price, even when he was at the long range of Pereira, yes, he was eating more damage than he was giving, but he was still having some success, and I worry that Fiallo won't have as much success at the long range in this fight. But I think this fight's going to end in finish. I really do. I do not see this going to the judges' scorecards.
I go through all of this. I have notes on all of the fights of Andrea Fiallo, going back to when he was 22, taking on Chidi and Njokuani on a card that was headlined by, Matt, drumroll please, Darian Caldwell and Joe Timanglo.
Wow.
Big time card. But when I look at this, I like Andrea Fiallo in this fight because he's so much more of a technical fighter, so much more of a technical boxer, and I think with the pace that he pushes, yes. When you push a guy like Michel Pereira back, what does he do? Well, he throws Superman punches off the cage, he throws moonsaults if we're talking about Road FC, and he throws flying knees, and he can definitely knock out Andrea Fiallo. I don't think he's a better grappler than Fiallo. I don't think he has the takedowns like guys can bring into, you know, later in fights. He's not the boxer Chris Curtis is at 170. I think for those reasons, I like Andrea Fiallo in this fight. And the fact that he's that big of an underdog, it's that much more of a reason to kind of go, really? Okay, I have Fiallo. So we're split on the pick here?
Yeah, I think Pereira... I don't see this going to the judges' scorecards. I think if Pereira does get tired, he'll get finished in the third round, but I think Pereira's going to tee off on him at the long range, and we'll see what happens after that.
Both of us split on the pick. I have Portugal's Andrea Fiallo to get the win. Matt going with Brazil's Michel Pereira, but listen, this is an amazing fight either way. I can't wait for it, and if one of us is wrong, one of us is wrong, and it's going to happen. So I absolutely love the fight. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. And we have 2 big-time title fights coming up. Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo, number 3, and the bad blood of teammates spilling over, boiling over. UFC 270, you're not going to want to miss it. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. The last leg of the trilogy in an interesting road here. We have the flyweight title up for grabs between Brandon Moreno, the assassin baby, taking on Deus de Guerra. It's Deiveson Figueiredo. And an interesting thing when you look at this fight, Jussier Formiga's probably sitting back in an armchair somewhere smoking a cigar going, man, if only I did a few things differently when I fought Brandon Moreno, I'd have a win over both of these guys. It's a crazy thing. Jussier, everybody forgets about him. He was pretty good. He was really good. And when you look at this fight, it's an interesting way because in the first fight, Deiveson Figueiredo won the fight, but he didn't because there was that nut shot. Herzog took the point, and that was really a difference maker in that one. So we get the rematch where Brandon Moreno knocks down the champion in the first round. In the second round, Figueiredo kind of gets into it, rallies, and then in the third round, well, it's all Moreno. He wins the belt, emotional scene. And now fast forward into 2022, he's getting gifted belts of Lego in Vegas. And that really is an interesting point. I mean, Brandon Moreno has so many teammates on this card. Morales is now training out of Entram Gym coming out of Ecuador. We have Argentina's Silvana Gomez Juarez training out of Entram Gym. We also have Valdez, who's taking on Frevola on this card out of Entram Gym. So a big time kind of glow up for the team over in Tijuana. And for Brandon Moreno, he does kind of split time now between Tijuana and Las Vegas. And that's another interesting thing. For Deiveson Figueiredo, we talked about it at length going into the rematch, that it was Team Figueiredo. He was investing money into his camp, his friends, his people that train with him. Bet on yourself. He loses that fight. And not that he's not betting, on himself, but he's made that bet and kind of hedged it a little differently because now he's training out a fight ready in Phoenix, Arizona. Santino DeFranco, Eddie Chow. We talked about this camp at length. Vanessa Demopoulos also on this card from Fight Ready if you want to pick somebody that's...
Please do not use her as an example as to why a guy's going to win a title.
No, she's on this card. She's from that gym. But... if you look at it for Figueiredo, training with Cejudo, Zhang Wei Li's there. It's champ camp, so to speak, or former champ camp.
Is John Jones there?
John Jones is also now there. Rakic has expressed an interest to fight there.
Athletes.
He's got a big fight coming up against Blachowicz. But when it comes down to this fight, really for Figueiredo, if he couldn't get it done with his team, with his group in Brazil, what a perfect gym to train out of now.
Oh, 100%. And that's always what you do. Like sometimes people make these crazy gym changes and you sort of question the move. But with Figueiredo, it does make sense. He trained at his own gym for 2 fights against Moreno. They fought to a draw in the first one. So, okay, skill-wise, we must be close. And then Moreno made the improvements that Figueiredo wasn't able to make in his second fight. So if you're in Figueiredo's mind, you're like, okay, I have to change something because I didn't make any improvements between the first and the second fight. So I think it will be a massive benefit for Figueiredo going into this third matchup. But just aside from the X's and O's, why aren't more people excited for this matchup? Like, I haven't seen a massive buzz around this fight, but to me, this is as good as MMA gets. Deiveson Figueiredo doesn't have a true weakness in his game. He's a good wrestler, he's got great submissions, he's one of the most powerful punchers we've ever seen at this weight class, and on the flip side, Brandon Moreno's like if Nate Diaz was actually like really good at everything. He's got great cardio, he's got great boxing, phenomenal jiu-jitsu, like there's nothing to dislike about either one of these guys. They represent MMA at its highest peak. I just wish that there was more buzz surrounding this trilogy.
The reason why is because neither guy had to fight Demetrius Johnson to win the belt, and because you have a heavyweight title main event. That's why they didn't make the thumbnail for this overall full card video, but they definitely deserve their own credit. And when you look at this fight, I mean, for Deiveson Figueiredo, is he a sushi chef on the side? Yeah. He is. Is he an adept martial artist? Yeah, he is.
Hairstylist?
He's a hairstylist, too. If Deiveson Figueiredo could pick a perfect walkout song for this fight, Canadian fans are going to like this one. Damn forbidden streets I talk with. Every single step I walk with. All the lovers in the world. Gowan. Wow. You know, he sings for Styx now. Kind of fun if you want it from that way. But he is definitely the most interesting man in MMA. And again, when you're training with a guy like Henry Cejudo, who says that, you know, to kind of fix the holes in John Jones' game and try and coach him through, he just needs to be tweaked a little bit. That's kind of an interesting mentionable.
I think more in life than MMA.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. But when I do look at it, I mean, Figueiredo definitely with the right group. Work some of those takedowns. Work your overall complete game. Because we know for Deiveson, he has power on the feet, but he kind of throws with reckless abandon sometimes, and that's what gets him caught. Not just other fights, but fights specifically against Moreno, who's great 1-2 down the middle.
And I feel like the Pantoja fight kind of exemplifies that perfectly for Figueiredo. He's super aggressive. He's marching down another knockout and heavy-handed power puncher, but when Figueiredo is able to land his shots effectively, and when he does have great accuracy, there's not a person who can stand in front of him on the feet. I don't care how technical TJ Dillashaw is. If he had fought Figueiredo instead of Cejudo, he probably gets knocked out by him too. Like, that's the level of power I put Figueiredo at. But the weird trade-off with great knockout power, Michael Bisping always said this about him and Vanderlei Silva. Like, striking-wise, they're probably both about a 10 out of a 10, right? Like, they're both really good strikers, but they do it in very different ways. Vanderlei Silva tries to knock you out with every punch that he throws, similar to Deiveson Figueiredo, whereas Bisping, very technical striker, he realizes that he's going to need more volume to get his opponent out of there. And I honestly think that there's a good parallel in this fight between that one, because for Moreno, he doesn't have the natural power Figueiredo has. I know he dropped Figueiredo in their second fight, and oddly enough, Figueiredo has yet to drop Brandon Moreno, but I still think Figueiredo hits way harder than Brandon. The difference is, speed and cardio make up for all of the issues that you have with power. And when you are a power puncher, and when you do go for the knockout, and when you aren't able to get that knockout, you're going to get tired as a result of it. And what I thought would happen in their second fight was, I thought Figueiredo would be able to land those power shots early, hurt Moreno to the point where Moreno was a lesser version of himself later, and Figueiredo would be able to take over where he wasn't able to in their first fight. In this third fight, though, I look at Figueiredo as like an NBA All-Star who's made like his 12th All-Star game at this point, and you don't really know what next year is going to look like. Like, he's Dirk Nowitzki in 2013. Like, he's still really good, but I don't know if he's still that guy who can get you to the finals, because at 125 pounds, when the weight cuts are starting to become an issue, when you do start to seem a step slow, it's really hard to get that back. And the last thing I'll say is that if Figueiredo fought at 135 pounds, I honestly think he could get into the top 5 of that division, even though it's the hardest division in the UFC, arguably, because that's how good his skills are. I just think at his size, at this age, with this weight cut, he's doing himself a disservice cutting down to 125 pounds still.
The only pushback that I have against that, and for anybody that's going to go out there and really kind of rag on his cardio or rag on the fact that he throws too many power shots early, he was able to do these things in the fights with Joseph Benavidez. He was able to
look at the Monkey God fight, though.
Yeah, but he was able to do these things in the first fight against Moreno, and it wasn't really that big of an issue. But the big key here for me, Brandon Moreno, straight shots down the middle, 1-1 in the second fight. Yeah, it was his boxing. Yes, it was his movement. His kicks really took over in that fight too, and that's one of those things that Moreno invests in the leg kicks more than most guys at flyweight. The other thing for Figueiredo, you touched on it, the power. He has the #1 stat of all time in this flyweight division that was always reigned by Demetrius Johnson. Most knockdowns ever in flyweight history at 8. Now, tied for first in flyweight finishes with Demetrius Johnson, tied for second with knockouts with 4, and he has the second best significant strike accuracy ever, behind Demetrius Johnson, at 56.9%. Moreno hangs around in a lot of categories, not necessarily top 5, but the craziest thing for me is Brandon Moreno in the return is 4-0-2. What a weird thing to have. A draw against Askar Askarov, a draw against Deiveson Figueiredo. Should have been a loss, but don't kick people in the nuts.
I thought he should have beat Askarov, to be completely fair.
And so on and so forth. But the craziest thing is, the UFC cut him because he lost to Sergio Pettis and Alessandro Pantogino, the Bellator champ, and the guy that will probably get the next title shot. Like, it's crazy to think of that. Beats Michael Perez outside of the UFC with LFA and ends up back in, fights Askarov, so on and so forth. Storybook story. But Matt, the odds for this one, Brandon Moreno open to -185. He's a -174 right now in best fight odds. For Figueiredo, open to +155. He's +145. So we go into the third fight, if you will. Over on Tapology, we haven't looked at the votes. Surprise that's there to you. I'm going to say over under 60% with the current champion.
I'll say slightly over.
All right, Matt. Quite a bit over. 1,017 total votes. 76 Moreno. 59% have the win by decision. For the 24% that have Figueiredo, 44% by decision, 38% by knockout. So we set it up in a certain way. What are we going with for a pick here?
I could see Figueiredo shocking everybody, hitting Brandon Moreno with a big shot and catching him with a guillotine on the way up. Because here's the thing people forget about Deiveson Figueiredo. He is such a good counter wrestler with his submission games that you don't want to shoot on him at all. Like, I don't want Brandon Moreno to shoot for a single takedown in this fight if I'm a Moreno believer. And I know he's got great top control. He's a phenomenal grappler in his own right. But that guillotine from Figueiredo is terrifying. It's one of those guillotines where the second you see it locked in, you're like, oh, he's going to tap immediately. Like, you're yelling at your TV. It's just inevitable, the result. Alex Perez was having some success early on in his fight with Figueiredo. The second he went for a takedown, Figueiredo got him in that guillotine, and the fight was over. I worry about those types of big moments from Figueiredo because of his big power on the feet and because of his submission ability, but I feel like we're seeing Brandon Moreno just enter his prime, and we're kind of seeing Figueiredo maybe step aside from his, because Figueiredo, I know he's the smaller guy height-wise in this fight, but he is huge for the flyweight division, and this weight cut's never been easy for him. Again, I always go back to that headline of when he fought Jussier Formiga, and after he lost that fight, he's like, yeah, Jussier's pretty good, but I also cut like 42 pounds before this fight. And when you're cutting 40 pounds at the heavyweight division, it's one thing. But when you're this small, like, that is a huge percentage of your body weight. And ever since that quote, I've always worried about Figueiredo making this cut down to 125 pounds.
And then he missed it in his first title shot.
Exactly. So there's been evidence that this has never been an easy weight cut for Figueiredo. And weight cutting doesn't get easier as you get older. And since a lot of people point to a tough weight cut as to why he was less durable in his last matchup, I like Brandon Moreno quite a bit in their third fight.
I've got Moreno in this one as well. Again, a guy with staying power. A guy who, whether it be Brandon Royval, and we're going to grapple a little bit, we're going to throw, he was able to beat him in that area. Askar Askarov is one of the best grapplers. I wouldn't say jiu-jitsu players. I wouldn't say wrestlers. He's he could be the best grappler in this division, and he's a guy that nobody, unless you're Marcel Dorf, really talks about in that air. Askar Askarov's that good. Brandon Moreno had a great fight against him.
Took his back.
Make a case either way, but he was able to do that in that fight. So there's a lot of things that I really like out of Moreno. Again, the work, whether it's at the PI, whether it's at Entram, he definitely has the right crew around him, but Deiveson Figueiredo's made those investments, moving everything to win this fight once and for all, and moving it to fight ready. So if you can make a strong case either way, I'm willing to listen to it. So let us know over in the comments section who you have in the first of 2 title fights. Both of us going with Mexico's Brandon Moreno to retain in the 3rd fight. I can't wait for this fight. It's going to be a great one. And in your main event, Bad Blood. You know, Taylor Swift wrote a song about that, and then she re-recorded it, and it's probably playing on the radio right now. I can't wait for it. Gane taking on Ngannou. You can't wait for it. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. If you're just joining Fight Night Picks for the first time, thanks so much. As always, one half your hosting duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, Matt Allen on their respective socials, Matt Allen FNP. We couldn't be anything further from the heavyweights that are going to be fighting this weekend, so we're just going to be the Canadian nerds that are going to tell you a little bit about this fight. And quite honestly, if you don't know anything about me, I love this fight. I love this fight more than any fight that's happened this year. How about that? I really do, because for Francis Ngannou, before Fight Night Picks was a thing in 2018, the catalyst to get me to start this was UFC 220. I drove down with friends to Boston. We took pictures with Habib. I'll throw one of those up there because the guy's head's bigger than 2 of my heads thrown together. I was going to say biceps, but that doesn't take much. But when I got excited for that one, I was sitting nosebleed and front and center for Ngannou and Miocic. And it was crazy because you could cut the tension with a knife in the building, and it was just insane. I mean, Ngannou went out there first round throwing wild shots and defending takedowns well enough. I mean, Miocic was able to get a few, but Ngannou could spring back up to his feet. And even as that fight went along, the thought was, with the fans and everybody there, listen, Ngannou still has the opportunity to knock out Miocic as that one goes on. Now, the parallels between these two guys, because we can set this one up as Bad Blood. Matt, what's really the story behind this one?
So, just first and foremost, MMA was illegal in France, and that's really stupid and makes no sense to me, but that's besides
Until the last couple of years.
Exactly. It just recently got legalized in that country. So there's not a lot of MMA opportunities in the country of France, which is where Ciryl Gane, of course, is from. And that's where Francis Ngannou was training to become a professional boxer at the time. And these two guys found themselves in the exact same gym together, which is wild to think about that, like, right now, the 2 best fighters in the world at their weight class, before they were even close to what they are now, were training together. So they know what they both look like at the bare bones of their game. Before they even had their Hall of Fame badges, before they even had their bronze badges, they knew each other. And then, of course, Francis ends up splitting from that gym. He now trains at Extreme Couture with Dewey Cooper and the boys, and he's made this massive progression throughout his career. Now, there's been some conflicting reports about just how serious the beef between these two really are. Like, Ciryl Gane himself came out this week and was like, listen, there's no real beef between us. Like, yeah, we're in different gyms right now, but I have no hard feelings towards him. And same vice versa. Like, this, to me, doesn't feel like a Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman type of a fight. It feels very much of, wow, we have the most technical heavyweight in the world, fighting the most powerful heavyweight in the world, and that's what makes this so much fun. Because when you break down a Francis Ngannou fight, when you look at his opponent's probably going to be more technical than he is. They're probably going to have better pure wrestling, better pure jiu-jitsu. But what Francis possesses is the biggest eraser we've ever seen in MMA. It erases all of the mistakes he makes in his fight to where you might 10-8 him for 4 rounds. It doesn't matter. He has enough power in his hands to knock you out at any point throughout the fight. And the first Stipe fight, oddly enough, is probably the best example of this, because if you go back and watch the 4th and 5th rounds of that fight, yes, Francis is tired. Yes, his hands are down by his waist. He's so tired he can barely hold his hands up. He hit Stipe with 3 punches after the start of the 4th round that would knock out like Secretariat in the 40s. Like, it would knock out pretty much anything if they landed even a little bit more clean. Now, Stipe has one of the best chins we've ever seen in the heavyweight division, and that was his night. But what Francis showed was that he can take an absolute crazy beating and be completely exhausted, and he still has enough power in the tank to land that one big bomb.
New Brunswickers can't make mistakes like that. That's where we're from in Canada, because New Brunswick and Grand Falls specifically, the home of Ron Turcotte, the jockey of Secretariat from the 70s, not the 40s, the 70s.
didn't know what Secretariat was around.
Well, you're from New Brunswick, you gotta get right. But when you look at this fight, I said the parallels. And again, these guys training in France, and you look at France, so many good kickboxers, Muay Thai artists, savate fighters. And you look at it for Ciryl Gane, he had that background in Muay Thai. And the fact that not just, you know, we're fighting Muay Thai fights and we're having fun because we can't really do anything else. You look at it, I mean, what was his overall record, Matt? 14-0 as a Muay Thai fighter? That's pretty good. Against decent level of competition? Well, hey, that's pretty good too. And the other thing about it, you want the parallels. So Francis Ngannou coming into the UFC, what level of competition did he take on? Well, he fought Luis Enrique, who's all right. Pretty good, right?
I mean, the shot that he hit him with was pretty good.
Pretty good. So it took Francis Ngannou 6 fights to get to the title. 2 years, a month, and a day between his debut and his title fight. And then he loses that fight. So total, to get back into the conversation, UFC 260, it took him 5 years, 3 months, and 8 days to win the title. For Ciryl Gane, it took him 6 fights to get to the title. A year, 11 months, and 28 days. Almost the same amount of time it took Ngannou to get to the belt. But then he won the belt, albeit it's interim, but he beat Derek Lewis, so he didn't have to take that build back time. For Ngannou, that was the most important part. That was, I'm leaving my gym at MMA Factory to go to the States to train with not just Dewey Cooper at Black Cobra Striking Systems, but Eric Nixick and everybody at Extreme Couture. You look at Francis Ngannou from his way up, his hellacious knockout of Alistair Overeem, his fight against Miocic, where he still did land good shots, but it was eventually the pressure, the pace, a little bit of the boxing of Miocic, but ultimately the wrestling of Miocic to get the win. And then you look at Ngannou after that. That Derek Lewis fight, just erase it from your memory.
You don't know. That's a good example of get your mind right. I don't care what you do, what area of work you are. Francis Ngannou was very open about that. He said, hey, I brought demons into that fight. I was worried I was going to get tired like I did in the Stipe fight. He wasn't right mentally going into that fight. And that's always a big point that we never really talk about because it's hard to tell. Like, you don't know what a person's mindset's going to be going into the fight. But that's a good example of that wasn't really the Francis Ngannou that we had seen previously.
Forget about the nuts and bolts and the low volume and the loss. Just focus on the fact that he was able to right the ship. And if you want to just focus on his last 5 fights, let's look at it. He beats Curtis Blades. He beats Cain Velasquez in a fight that probably never should have happened. He beats Junior Dos Santos disgustingly. He beats Jairzinho Rosenstrike, which that was a little bit of the old Francis, just going across the cage and throwing shots. And then he beats Stipe Miocic. And I have a prop in the office, and I keep it here because I'm fun. And it's signed, and it says King of 4. I have a signed Butterbean glove because Francis Ngannou's in that club now. He's appeared on Jackass, and he punches Danger Aaron right in the private area with a cup on. So for Danger Aaron, a guy who featured prominently in the show Portlandia, because again, I'm a fun guy and I watch fun shows, Danger Aaron took that shot. Good for him. I'm never going to do it. We'll see if Ciryl Gane does. Now, hopefully he doesn't take one to the groin, but that's where this really gets interesting because for Gane, we've seen him challenge certain fighters, maybe one more so than any, down on the mat. It was the man himself, Don'Tale Mayes, who looked great in his last fight, by the way.
I'm so upset that we're talking about this right now.
It's a performance bonus win late in the 3rd round, a heel hook win for Ciryl Gane.
Francis submitted Freight Train Hamilton, but we never talk about that.
Yeah, that's true.
No, my point is, you can't always bring up the fact that one guy submitted a very low-level UFC heavyweight, and you can't say the same about the other.
Ciryl Gane over Francis Ngannou, you would think, is most likely to take any fight down to the mat. He's most adept at fighting on the ground. He has more submission ability, so on and so forth. Now, this is where I want to tie everything in. UFC 220 to UFC 260, Francis Ngannou. You want to talk about a different fighter. Going back and watching UFC 220, it's Ngannou running across the cage, throwing wild shots. I'm going to throw, reckless abandon because that's my game plan. His last fight against Stipe, his hands are nice. He's playing the defensive game when he's just standing at range. Happens to throw a head kick. Stipe looks like he just woke up from a nap, took his ball cap off. His hair's floating in the wind. It's really weird. It's just an odd look for a champion. I want my champions to look...
You didn't think he looked handsome, Greg?
I don't know. I mean, that's not me saying that. But when I really do focus on that fight...
Trying a new look.
Takedown attempt from Miocic, a sprawl from Ngannou. Reverses, goes to the back of Miocic, lands a lot of great shots, almost finishes that fight, and then in the 2nd round, boom goes the dynamite, as that guy said, and it was all Ngannou in that one.
I have a few weird things about this fight because I honestly think it's going to look like Derek Lewis versus Francis for like 2 rounds. Because here's the problem. I don't know when Ciryl Gane is going to feel comfortable engaging with Francis. Because if Francis waits on Gane to go forward on him, Francis can knock him out and it's going to be odd. Like, it's going to be a crazy knockout. Like, Ciryl is very good when he's fighting under his terms, and that's the great thing about Ciryl Gane. He's so cerebral that he makes the fight happen under his terms. It's like Chris Paul. You can't just look at what he does on the stat sheet and think that that tells the whole story. Chris Paul controls the game. He slows things down. He adds just the little X factors that even if you're a hardcore fan, you yourself don't really think of. With Ciryl Gane, he's always making sure that the fight is taking place under his terms. That's what happened with the Derek Lewis fight. The difference is Lewis didn't throw back on Gane like I think Ngannou will. And with Gane, he's very odd because he is such a technician on the feet, but the one area where I don't think he is at that Hall of Fame area, especially on the feet, is when he's close range boxing. He throws a lot of winging hooks with his arms, and he doesn't always move his shoulders with them. That's the one spot on the feet where I think he could be susceptible to getting hit by one of those big Francis bombs. But Gane on the outside is going to be very interesting because if he does just decide to stay on the outside, pitter-patter away with some kicks of his own, and never really engage in the pocket, he could probably win a very, very boring 50-45. And I understand no one wants to hear that, especially when it's the interim champion versus the champion for the heavyweight title. Like, we want to see Junior Dos Santos, Cain Velasquez 2 and 3. But Gane's best path to victory is never get in the pocket, and when I do, close the distance so it's only clinch. And it's going to be really interesting because I feel like Gane's clinch is a little bit oversold because we saw that knockout against Junior Dos Santos at the end of his career. JDS couldn't eat any shot at that stage of his career, so I don't think Gane's just going to get Francis in a plum clinch, knock him out with 2 elbows, and that'll be the story. I actually think I think Francis is slightly underrated with his own clinch game. And this is the other thing. The improvements that Francis has made haven't all been technical. They've also been more like fight IQ adjustments. Because what I see in Francis, he still uses his athleticism. He still uses his strength. But he's doing it in a much more intelligent manner. He's not just getting up like Derek Lewis. When we saw the sprawl against Stipe, he didn't just use his strength. He used the proper technique to get his hands down, and then he used his strength. It was very similar to his takedown attempt. I don't even know if you want to call it secured against Stipe, because he did just kind of take him by the back, pick him up, and dump him again. That doesn't show me great wrestling, but what it does show is you're using your energy in a much more intelligent manner, and that's going to be very important for this fight, because if Francis has any Achilles heel, it's that his power's so great that his cardio's diminished by it. And for Ciryl Gane, if he has any knock against him, it's that he can almost be a little bit too reserved in his fights, and that's really my big key to this fight is, do you think he's going to be the one to initiate the exchanges with Francis, or do you think it'll be the other way around?
No, there is one major key that I have to a Ciryl Gane, whether it's a win or a loss, and you talk about it, you know, having issues, especially when it gets into close boxing range. Hasn't been an issue so far, and he's fought bigger, longer, rangier guys for heavyweight. Mace is one of those guys. He's on the lower end of the spectrum, but his highlight is definitely his boxing, and oddly enough, his judo in his last fight. But if you do look at it for Ciryl Gane, what does he do so well? Against a guy like Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who Ngannou made, you know, short work of, Rozenstruik's a really good kickboxer. He is. He really, really is. And against Gane, he wasn't able to get moving because Gane controlled the distance from the second that fight started. In and out, stance switches, moving his head when he's not being thrown at. But Gane does this. When he gets backed up, when somebody lands or goes to wing, he's one of those guys, not like Anderson Silva, but he's one of those guys that can move his head, pull back, and just get out of range and then move away. Against a guy like Ngannou with his range, that could be a bad thing.
Yeah, you don't want to pull back with your head straight up against a guy like Francis.
And Gane will do that. As much as and again, Ciryl Gane's a guy from 2000.
Volkov caught him a couple times doing it.
And he did catch him clean. The weird thing about the Volkov fight, we can talk about it. 2 of the judges, 50-45 for Gane. One of them, 49-46. Between round 4 and round 5, Volkov's coach says, this fight's 2-2. Just win the 5th round. You'll win the fight. Bad coaching. But when you look at it, and just to kind of correct, 13-0 was the pro Muay Thai career for Ciryl Gane. 9 knockouts. He was the 2011 Académie Française de Muay Thai champion and he defended that belt, so you love to see it. But we look at this one, the odds in this kind of clash between former teammates. Ngannou open to -190 favorite. He's a +123 right now. Gane open to +165. He is the -147 favorite as of now on Sunday night. We look at the Tapology votes. Surprised us, they are to you. 1,080 total votes. 61% Gane, 58% by decision. For the 39% that have Francis Ngannou, 89% have him to win by decision. Now, Matt, the interesting part really comes down to it when you think, okay, Ngannou has the power. We know this. He definitely has the advantage in this fight and in every single one of his fights and against any human being on this planet.
He could fight a bulldozer and he would probably have the power edge.
Ciryl Gane against like a 750, I'd like to see it. Against like a D7 or a D8, I'd like to see it. We threw it out there to our fans in the community tab a few hours ago, and out of the votes, 63% going with Ciryl Gane, 37% going with Ngannou. So echoing that sentiment, Mike is saying Gane's road to the title just seems a little too flawless, not unlike Francis the first time. And look how that turned out. Francis has the experience, and if he can remain patient and not become overwhelmed, I gotta pick him for the knockout.
It's not a bad take.
Travis is saying Gane will be the champ. Team El Kakoi is saying Francis is the GOAT, easy money and still. And Drew Cliff saying going with Gane, but nothing would surprise me in this one. I agree with Drew. I'm going with Gane, but nothing would surprise me. I tip my hand there, but it's time to make the pick. I'm going with Gane, Matt. What are you saying here?
I think Francis is going to win, and I have a very specific situation as to why I think he's going to. Francis can catch kicks, and Ciryl Gane throws a lot of kicks. I think he's going to catch a kick and rush him off of that one-caught kick, and if he does get Gane, especially straight up against the fence, he's going to hit him with a big combination. And here's the thing. You can be a 15-time kickboxing black belt. I know that's not even a thing, but you get the idea. I don't care how experienced you are in any singular martial art. If you get hit by Francis, none of that experience matters. Like, I cannot even put into words how powerful of a puncher Francis Ngannou is if you've never seen him fight before. Like, if you were trying to explain to somebody who's never watched MMA before just how heavy-handed Francis Ngannou is, you would tell them that he takes people who weigh 260 pounds off of their feet when he hits them, and it's the truth. And I do think that if he is able to rush Gane and really catch him off guard with one of those big flurries, I think he'll be able to hit him and put him down. And the last thing I'll say, I worry about Gane's movement in two ways. I think it's a huge benefit, but when you move a lot, especially left to right, if you zig when you should zag and you move into one of those shots, it's just going to make Francis's power hurt even that much worse.
We've all played UFC 4 and thought, you know what, I'm going to go this way, and you get hit by a counter hook, and then you get put on a poster, and sometimes you end up
This is going to be an amazing fight, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for my reasoning here, I like Ciryl Gane's movement laterally, and I think that's the thing that can really, if you're fighting a guy like Francis Ngannou, if you use your movement and get him to overcommit to a lot of his shots, there's an opportunity for you, not just to hit him, but to reduce that power bar even more. And listen, I think in a fight like this, that is Ciryl Gane's opportunity. I love everything about it. There's just two things. On the in-close range, I like Ngannou, who, again, when you look at the reach, pretty darn close between these two guys. And the other thing, Ciryl Gane, when he backs up, if he does back up straight, the hands tend to drop, the chin tends to go up. And it's worked every fight until now, and it worked in every fight that he had at Muay Thai, which was his specialty. But against a guy like Francis Ngannou that has such extension at the end of his shots, when you're hitting Aaron McGahee in the cup, you can do anything. So for me, I'm going with Ciryl Gane. Matt, you're going with Francis Ngannou. But the best part about this fight is going to be the fight companion, right?
Well, of course. If you love MMA and the fun hijinks that come with it, then you want to check out not only our fight companion, but we have Question Mark Kicks. It always airs 2 hours before the first prelims do. Just gives us a little last chance to go back over the fights. If anyone missed weight, any big storylines, just gives us a chance to go back and go over those. And yeah, like you said, we have a fight companion going on during the main card. Listen, there's some people, they're a little tired of the current modern day commentary crew for the UFC. They want something new. Well, we have that new thing, and it's the Fight Night Picks Fight Companion.
Fight Night Picks Companion is what we've called it, and if you want to tune into that, just subscribe and you'll know when we go live. You hit the bell notification. I can't wait for the fights coming up this weekend. I know everybody's excited about it, so as we always say, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and let's get into it.